Ready to have your mind blown insane fights, brain-melting twists, and drama that'll steal your heart in a flash? Smash that subscribe button on Manhwa T-Rex now. And hey, dive into today's recap video right this second. And don't forget to leave a comment below to share your thoughts or feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Some weapons are truly only found in the hands of those who are privileged. They are called divine weapons. These weapons are the very materialization of a person's soul. Thanks precisely to this, these pieces of equipment are often endowed with truly unique abilities. A great noble family once defeated the evil god, the Catastrophe Duchy, from their very birth. Its members have absolutely everything. Bodies built for combat, truly exceptional talent for battle, and also divine weapons that are truly incredible. Our protagonist was born into this very family, and always dreams of becoming a great hero one day, proudly wielding the divine weapons he eventually possesses. At least, that's truly how it should have been. But during the fateful oracle ceremony, one's divine weapon usually manifests. He sadly ended up discovering that he wouldn't have one. It was the very first time in the entire history of his family that this had ever happened, making him their first great failure. And so, because of this, he was considered deeply inferior and suffered constant, harsh humiliation. Being called a total public embarrassment, the family's own second son, Zane, was naturally completely unsympathetic to him. Useless people like our protagonist, who failed to obtain a divine weapon, simply did not belong in that place. He cruelly used this as an excuse to massage the protagonist's face, in a supposedly unintentional manner, performing brutal, temporary facial harmonization sessions on him. Jessica and Sarah also merely watched, doing absolutely nothing. Jessica in particular clearly seemed to enjoy these humiliation sessions. Young Sarah, on the other hand, did not like at all what was happening. She bravely tried to intervene in some way, attempting to stop it. But Jessica cruelly made her trip and fall hard to the ground. She did this because Sarah had been called there simply to observe, to witness what happens to those who are utterly weak and have no future. She was not supposed to intervene at all. Seeing Jessica coldly step on his friend's head made him deeply worried, but he was still in the middle of a painful, involuntary massage session, and was harshly reminded of that. His cruel aggressor said that filthy hybrids are far too attached to each other. While mercilessly beating the protagonist, he continued to insult him with vile words. They were merely children of concubines, so they were also constantly humiliated by the others, being repeatedly called mutts. After being thoroughly beaten, he tearfully apologized for not being able to protect Sierra, as he was far too weak. With a brave, big smile on her face, the kind girl told him not to worry, as she had firmly promised to always stand by his side. But the boy did not want to remain in this awful situation. He told her that he would become much stronger and stronger, even if he did not yet possess a divine weapon. He also solemnly promised that he would protect her with his very own life. After tightly embracing each other, she thanked him for making that heartfelt promise, and sadly, he was unable to live up to that promise, because just a few mere days later, he was cruelly banished from the family. He immediately began to grieve bitterly, overwhelmed by sheer rage because he knew that she would then be persecuted. He desperately needed to become strong enough to take her out of that vile place. Mastering skills with a normal weapon was simply utterly useless against a knight with a divine weapon, so he had to become even stronger indeed. In truth, he had absolutely no other option available. He placed a heavy bag full of money on the counter of that very shop, showing the gleaming gold coins. He then said he would take one weapon of each type, a most unusual request. The shopkeeper perhaps thought the boy was about to start a personal war. 2 long years had passed since he had been exiled from his family. Riding a lone horse, he continued his arduous journey. The boy had indeed learned a few things, but he still, sadly, did not have a divine weapon. Before him now stood several fierce enemies, dangerous, vile monsters. He had many potent weapons to use against them. He was also truly eager to finally begin the fight, because he had now mastered all of them, becoming truly formidable. He even had a firearm, especially ideal for collecting debts from delinquent borrowers. There was absolutely nothing the creatures could do against him. At the very end of the battle, a mysterious, hooded man seemed to be watching everything, until he then finally decided to speak to the boy. He curiously wanted to know if that boy always carried all those many weapons, and if this was the typical concern of someone who had sadly failed to obtain a divine weapon. He had perhaps already forgotten about the trap he had set, and was truly looking for someone he could trust, someone with enough real potential to eventually become a great hero. Our protagonist could only have one first impression of this mysterious, cloaked figure, as his strange conversation seemed like the ramblings of a mere madman. But an intense blue glow suddenly appeared in the man's hand, firing a crackling bolt of pure energy toward the boy. A brightly shining object was now in front of him. It looked like a powerful weapon, leaving the protagonist truly, genuinely impressed by what was happening. The man then said he would trust the boy, leaving that powerful weapon with him, still firmly embedded in the ground. The strange object glowed brightly while releasing energy. He thought it might be a sword, and slowly started to approach it. until he finally touched it with his own hand, only to shockingly realize that what he had received was just the mere sword scabbard, the legendary Divine Sheath of Avalon, a unique item that allows its user to safely store their divine weapon and pass it on to another worthy person, faithfully passed down from generation to generation. It now holds the very weapons of those who were the 5 legendary greatest in history. Whoever is truly able to wield it will have the finest armaments on the entire planet. The boy's fierce determination is now focused on achieving complete mastery of that sacred item. Since that fateful event, 3 more years have passed. He was then with his mentor and a dragon soared across the vast sky. The monstrous creature charged at them, truly furious. It had already prepared its scorching flames, ready to utterly annihilate all living beings from the very face of the earth. But that intense heat was not a concern at all for the protagonist, who remained quite unimpressed. He immediately invoked forth Avalon, and the legendary white sheath appeared instantly in his hand. He firmly held it as if he were just about to unsheath a sword. Intensely focusing, he commanded the great power to manifest. Then a truly intense glow appeared on the sacred item, and also in the boy's hand. Another brilliant glow emerged until finally in his grasp, the mighty windshield of Achilles took distinct form, powerful enough indeed to generate a truly effective, protective magical barrier against the fearsome dragon's attack, to fiercely counterattack. He then invoked the Stormhammer Mjolnir. He was then properly positioned to annihilate the vile creature, swiftly leaping onto the dragon, brandishing the hammer, ready now to deliver a truly massive blow. The resulting strike was immensely powerful and crushing, violently slamming the creature's huge head into the ground. A single decisive hit was quite enough. His proud mentor declared that he had finally mastered Avalon. He then told him that he could now safely go to his sister, as not even a mighty S-rank paladin would now be able to stop him. Hearing these welcome words, pure hope filled the protagonist's eyes with great joy. He firmly said he would do exactly as instructed. 5 long years had passed since he was cruelly banished, and now indeed he had more than enough power to finally rescue his sister. As he swiftly advanced, he truly hoped that Sarah was safe, because he was at last on his direct way to her, to bravely rescue her from that truly despicable place. However, upon finally reaching the desolate region, he sadly saw that raging fire had consumed everything. He did not truly know what possibly could have happened, and immediately he became extremely worried. Amidst the roaring flames, he saw several strange banners raised. He very quickly recognized those ominous symbols. They clearly belonged to another rival duchy, the Roth-Windsor. A most fierce battle was well underway, a brutal civil war. This was definitely not good at all. He then rushed into the burning castle, desperately searching for his sister, approaching a truly massive gate that was already mysteriously slightly open. But then upon entering the grand hall, he was instantly met with a truly heartbreaking scene. A very severely wounded body lay there on the ground. It couldn't really be possible that this horror had happened. That was indeed the body of his own dear sister. He gently took her up into his arms, deeply, terribly concerned. The poor girl showed no reaction. It was horribly possible that the very worst had already come to pass. He vividly remembered the hopeful words he had spoken to her, and the solemn promise he had failed to keep. Completely, utterly devastated, a desperate raw scream filled the air of that place. After finally perfecting his immense power, he had still been unable to accomplish the one vital thing that had motivated him all these long years. A sudden bolt of energy was coming straight for him. It passed right through the unsuspecting boy's body. His young chest had been brutally pierced. There was clearly another sinister presence there with them, that truly menacing mana. It was undoubtedly from a fearsome warrior of S-rank level. The strange man knew that this was indeed Bel, the very one who had been previously banished. But the dying boy could not understand how he had ever been recognized. But now that no longer truly mattered, because he would very soon join his dear sister in the afterlife. This was most definitely the vile person who had taken his sister's life, raising his stained blade. He was then ready to end the protagonist's life, who was then completely consumed by his own destructive grief. But already grievously weakened, he could do absolutely nothing. His poor chest was pierced even more so violently. After these truly grim events, he suddenly found himself before the priest once more, curiously looking at his own small hands. He did not remotely understand how he had been sent back to that place. That ornate stained glass window was strangely familiar. He was now inside his own family's cathedral. The sacred ceremony was just taking place, and he was absolutely certain that he had indeed died. If this truly was the ceremony, then there was only really one explanation. He had somehow returned back in time. The old priest instructed him to now clasp his hands together, and to visualize his sacred divine equipment. But this boy already knew what happened the first time. At this precise point in his young life, he had not as yet inherited the Avalon, and was therefore already expecting to be cruelly banished. So then he could restart his arduous journey once again. But then something quite different happened, leaving him truly, utterly astonished. There was absolutely no doubt. What now stood before his eyes was Avalon. He firmly believed that this precious time he would do everything again. with the great power he now thankfully possessed, he would finally be able to change cruel fate. Nam's true. Real life was just about to begin. The young boy looked intently at the sheath in his hands, fully and deeply aware of the immense potential it held. It was truly something so very unusual that even the priest, who had clearly never seen anything quite like it before, had something quite important to say about it. Already anticipating what the doubtful priest would say, he already well knew fighting with a mere sheath would not be possible. As he was then caught quite off guard, the priest calmly said that really wasn't what he had been planning to say. Even so, the determined young boy, now overflowing with newfound confidence, coolly assured him not to ever worry, that this was the very greatest divine weapon in existence. Now swiftly walking through the familiar castle corridors, he was urgently searching for his dear sister. If he had truly returned to the distant past, she must surely still be alive. His tragic past life was still very recent, and so he was profoundly, deeply worried about Sarah. At long last, he finally reached the door to her room. A young girl sitting quietly by the window heard the door open. Sarah then welcomed him with a genuinely wide smile. Indeed, miraculously she was alive and quite well. She still radiated the very same beauty. He keenly remembered seeing her, this brother, whom she certainly hadn't expected. The girl then approached him to give him a hug. She also keenly wanted to know how his important ceremony had gone. The overwhelmed boy didn't even immediately respond. He was just so overjoyed that she was miraculously still alive. That heartfelt hug was so very sudden that young Sarah wondered if something bad had happened to her brother. He still deeply regretted not being able to save her in his previous tragic life. The vivid memory of that awful pain was still too intense for him. He would absolutely not allow his dear sister to go through that suffering again. For right now, he could finally fulfill his vital promise. It didn't really take long for the girl to then complain about the hug. It was indeed too tight. Even so, however, it was quite fine. She was genuinely happy to have received it. Only just then did she finally notice something on the boy's face. Actual tears were uncontrollably streaming down his eyes, and she didn't know why. Gently running her soft hand over his head, she kindly comforted him and softly told him everything would be fine, because now they truly had each other. Hearing those gentle words deeply warmed the boy's heart. Apparently, it seemed he had grown up somewhere in Alabama. His sneering Amok's brother also then entered the room, pointedly noticing how surprisingly well the mutts were getting along. He declared he had been looking for Belle for quite some time. That indeed was Zane, the true, actual sadist. The arrogant little jerk smugly said he had already heard the news. His weaker brother had received a truly peculiar item during the ceremony. Apparently the priest really loved meddling in others' affairs. A true and utter gossip. Belle then confirmed that he had received a sheath. His cruel brother couldn't possibly hide his contempt. Laughing quite uncontrollably, he then said, "A mere sheath wasn't any weapon, and it suited that poor soul perfectly. He would absolutely never be able to fight with only that, and the two of them there together were truly complete idiots." The furious protagonist had to tightly clench his fist. He was sorely tempted to swiftly perform an unsanctioned, brutal orthodontic procedure right on the little jerk. Instead, however, he calmly gave him a chance to take back his words. But the arrogant little jerk didn't at all understand his stance. He simply wasn't used to ever seeing his half-brother stand up for himself. So the determined protagonist sternly warned him again to take back what he had said. Clearly sensing that this now was a challenge, the vile little jerk was instantly filled with even more hatred. Now then, he would surely teach the concubine's son a lesson. Unfortunately indeed for the arrogant little jerk, the prepared protagonist had many years of intense training with his mentor. Swiftly landing a single powerful strike to his stomach, he ensured the boy would certainly reflect on his actions from now on. That poor kid only just avoided vomiting his lunch, because the food had already passed the critical point of no return. He then collapsed onto the ground, curled up. Perhaps he had felt the sharp blow to his liver, and his blood pressure had suddenly dropped. Looking down coolly at the little jerk, the protagonist gravely advised him not to threaten Sierra again, or he might be very forcefully re-educated in proper manners. Frustrated, the little jerk then called his half-brother a bastard. Now he was truly going to take the violence to the next level. With his own divine weapon, he fiercely promised to make his brother beg for forgiveness. He would surely scorch his skin, seeing that the little jerk clearly wanted a serious fight. Then so be it, he told Sarah to step far back. Things were just about to get fun, but he gently reassured her first, telling her everything would be quite fine. He would handle this whole situation with ease, preparing for battle. He quickly summoned the mighty Avalon into his hand. Now he was fully armed with the mysterious sheath. His brother utterly refused to believe he could be defeated by a mere object that wasn't even a weapon. After all, he was already an actual E-ranked paladin. A lowly bastard like him would never stand a chance. That was indeed somewhat relevant. Haladoms, you see, were divided into ranks. Everything truly depended on their strength. Upon first receiving their divine weapon, They were automatically classified as mere F rank by channeling pure mana into their weapon. They advanced to E rank, from D rank and far above. That same mana could also be used for special attacks to surpass B rank. One absolutely had to master the unique abilities of their equipment. It was quite bizarre that the little jerk was bragging about being E rank. He still had such a long way to go. The protagonist didn't even feel remotely challenged by this. His sheer overwhelming confidence only made the little jerk even more intensely furious, being even more deliberately provocative. He said his brother was being so very cute. That was the absolute last straw. He was going to strike the wretched mutt with overwhelming force. Sarah became quite worried, certain that things could take a dangerous turn. Placing his firm hands on the sheath, he invoked the fabled Sword of Light. Before them suddenly appeared Caliburn, a truly formidable sword. The little jerk couldn't possibly believe it. His weapon's flames were utterly useless against that, not to mention, he had absolutely no idea what that sword even was. The swift counterattack caused the little jerk to lose his balance. Even more truly surprising was that his divine weapon had been cleanly cut by that sword. The boy looked on in sheer fear, realizing he had been so completely overpowered, still quite unable to comprehend what had happened. He was so sure there had been nothing inside that sheath. Approaching him coolly, the protagonist wanted to know if he was satisfied, or if he would now prefer to beg for forgiveness. Now, like a truly sore loser, he claimed he had been unfairly tricked. He didn't even know the boy was armed. If he had only known, he wouldn't have attacked, because he was a coward. He even foolishly managed to threaten him, saying he wouldn't forget this. Then he hastily fled the room, terrified and with his underwear now completely obliterated. The protagonist made quite sure to follow him. This wasn't over just yet. Down by his hand was a fire-spitting lead dispenser, Ragnarok. With that little jerk in his sights, he fired one single shot. The poor soul tried to escape, realizing the bullet had passed so dangerously close to his face, striking the hard wall right in front of him. Staring, aghast, at the hole left by the bullet, he became even more terribly frightened. Everything was becoming more and utterly more confusing for him. It made absolutely no sense. How could the boy now be wielding a different weapon? He'd only just used a sword. It was simply impossible for him to have more than one divine weapon. The protagonist calmly advised him not to forget this. He really shouldn't provoke Sierra again. Either way, it was entirely up to him to decide what he would do from now on, and the little jerk had no more clean underwear left to ruin. His palpable fear only grew, with cold, hard eyes, much like a ruthless loan shark collecting debts from defaulters. He sternly warned that the consequences of the little jerk's actions could swiftly earn him a hole in his forehead. Desperate now, the little jerk ran off to save his own life, while the protagonist coolly put away his divine weapon. Sarah, who had keenly seen everything, was absolutely amazed. Truly, she was fine, but she eagerly wanted to know if those incredible weapons were her brother's divine armament, so he gently reminded her he had already told her she could leave, everything safe in his hands. The girl found it really quite cool, and all the protagonist truly wanted was to continue, protecting that one beautiful smile he would never, ever lose to anyone again. Elsewhere, the little jerk quickly went to report what had happened. He had gone directly straight to his father, telling the Duke that he had been so humiliated like a dog. The Duke was greatly intrigued that Belle had received multiple divine weapons. The little jerk strongly insisted that it wasn't normal. Belle must surely have made a pact with Bill's Bob, the lung shark, and because of that very act, he should be banished immediately. But the Duke merely ignored his words. He was far too engrossed in the grand possibilities of having a powerful heir rising from his high throne. He completely disregarded the little jerk, asking where his own father was going. He soon learned that he was heading to see Belle. He absolutely needed to confirm for himself if this was really true. After that taxing event, the boy needed to rest for a while. He went straight to his bed to recover. He had indeed won the battle, but he was still in the frail body of a child. He was so extremely exhausted, as he still couldn't fully control his mana with mastery. That should have been a true fire shot, but it sadly ended up being a regular shot. He was definitely still at mere F rank. He sorely needed to improve his strength, but he knew well he couldn't remain at this low power level. He began to vividly recall the battle he had witnessed. It was the Raffensers. That vile symbol belonged to them. They were a hated family with whom they had an old rivalry. Anything really could have been the spark that ignited that conflict. Surely the one who had viciously attacked him must have been from that family, but this very time, things would be different. He would surely protect his sister, and to truly do that, he also desperately needed to be more respected within his own family. The great doors to his room swung open. The boy looked up at the one who had entered. It had been quite a while since they had last seen each other, and he had absolutely no idea why his father was there. Galleon truly had accomplished great feats in the grand battle that took place 20 years ago, all alone. He had once fought against the truly evil god. He then carved his path through the dark continent, using only his trusted sword. He was recognized by many indeed as the Saint of the Sword, and standing there beside his father was that little jerk. Now he fully understood the real reason his father had come. He was most definitely being accused of something grave. But this This was the truly perfect situation for him. The absolute fastest way to be valued was to be promptly noticed by the very head of the family. Deeply bowing, he showed due respect to the Duke. The old man then said, the boy had truly changed a lot since the last time they met, but this very time he had come to him as a father and simply asked him to relax. With great surprising maturity, Bell said that wasn't quite possible. Just one single word could be gravely misunderstood, and he needed to be truly responsible before the Duke. The old man was quite smitten by the maturity of the mere snot-nosed kid. He then asked the young boy to stand up, and so he did, and he would act as the boy himself suggested. He would remain there, formally as the Duke. Immediately, his stern presence became truly overwhelming. The Duke's immense pressure was utterly terrifying. He had now learned that his own sons had fought, and conflicts between dear siblings were strictly forbidden. Bell showed only a hint of regret, and the little jerk still believed he would very soon see the vile bastard being punished. No one in that whole house could remain standing under the Duke's immense power. But the brave boy had already steadied himself. He said firmly that he and his younger sister had been cruelly harassed. Hearing this rather shocking confession, the Duke then asked if his orders had been violated over mere childishness. The boy firmly confirmed once more and added that he had no true regrets, and the Duke then wanted to know if he really didn't regret disobeying his strict orders. Bell then said that abandoning those he loved was a far greater disgrace. For a paladin, he would always fight to protect his beloved sister, even if his direct opponent was his own older brother. As he bravely spoke, the Duke observed him so intently. This was the very path of the knight he truly wished to walk. The Duke then pointed the sharp tip of his sword right at him. He asked grimly what he would do if his opponent were actually him, but the young boy held his ground firmly. He wouldn't flinch even if his opponent was the Duke himself. The old man seriously tried to intimidate him with his very gaze, but he instead ended up liking his young son's resilience. He said then that he would let this one incident be ignored, much to the little jerk's profound dismay, and looking hard at him, he was greatly disappointed that Zane had harassed his own dear sister, and then even lost a fight. The little jerk truly hadn't expected to be put in his place so like that. The Duke told him grimly he should be deeply ashamed, and not dare show his wretched face before him. He understood Bell's hard choice, and indeed acknowledged that it was courageous of him to say just that. Fully knowing the dire consequences of his words, the boy then apologized for being so reckless. But his own father said that was the exact attitude he expected from true catastrophe knights. Now he truly wanted the boy to show him his real power. He asked then to see his divine armament. The boy simply did as requested. A soft blue light began to emerge now between his hands, and the Duke was far more impressed that the sheath was Avalon, his own divine armament. But even to the Duke, that made little sense. He had only heard rumors of the famed legendary weapon that truly carried the spirit of the first, original paladin. It was often wielded by great heroes throughout all history. He asked then if it was true that the mere boy had used both a sword and a strange firearm, and Bell then confirmed it. He said those weapons resided well within Avalon. To prove his very words, he then showed both to his father, immediately. The Duke then began to wonder if this was even truly possible, and to his great, total surprise, he then heard that the boy could yet only use 2 at a time. But amazingly, there were 3 more weapons deep in the sheath. That one son of his was definitely destined to be a next hero. He told him plainly he had no real interest in the weak, but from now on, he surely had high expectations for his bold future. As he soon left the room, he told him to always keep working hard. The great doors finally closed, and the boy could now rest. That awful pressure had been truly overwhelming. He just really needed to keep improving. But it was a great shame he had only a child's body. He now needed to reach D rank as so quickly as possible, and for that alone, he had to surely hunt monsters, to thereby absorb much more mana. He would then head to the nearest forest to hunt still some orcs. One meg creature had finally fallen, and the head of one such creature lay cold on the ground, torn separated from its body, lost in the forest. A grim slaughter continued. There was quite nothing the creatures could do, because something truly far fiercer was indeed there. The great beast's teeth were as sharp even as iron swords. It loudly roared, furiously asserting its grim dominance. That same forest certainly brought back old, nostalgic memories. After being so banished in his past life, he had once trained there for quite some time. But then something felt strange. He had now been walking for a long while, and still hadn't encountered even one monster yet. Within the dark bushes, a sly creature watched him. He then finally came across some dead orcs, but they were all in pieces. Their foul remains were now a part of the forest's strange decor. It was a strange scene, as terrifying as it was also unusual, and as he then tried to make quick sense of it, he was then suddenly startled by a low, terrifying sound. The quick boy turned right around to see what it was. An attack was now in motion, and he had to quickly defend himself. The incoming force was greater than his own, sending him truly flying. This was certainly not the creature he wanted to encounter. Yes, that was definitely the cursed Fenrir. The true reason there were no monsters in the vast forest was because of this E rank alpha creature. He barely had any mana left and was at most just an E rank. It would be truly great if he could somehow leave immediately. Then looking into the huge creature's cold eyes, he somehow knew he would be killed right on the spot. The boy now needed to stay alert. Quite alert. To avoid becoming dog food. So caught completely off guard, he realized. Too late. The monster's speed was greater than he had expected. He desperately had to throw himself out of the way of the attack. In his hands. He then summoned the fire spring pistol, firing several rapid shots directly at the creature, but it somehow managed to dodge them all. Now he was in real deep trouble, without a doubt. Since his mana was still quite low, his bullets simply weren't fast enough. The firearm truly wouldn't be effective. He quickly needed to try something else entirely. With his sword firmly in hand, he charged at his attacker. The beast, called Paul, was indeed a formidable threat, but the boy somehow managed to dodge that devastating strike. And because of that, he then found an opening that could work. In his favor, he swiftly struck at the creature, but it still managed to evade as well. Something truly impressive, indeed. He truly hadn't expected that. He now needed to rethink his strategy. He was facing a real grave risk. If he were at his full peak power, the forest dog would have swiftly already been annihilated. The wolf fiercely charged at him once again. Furious, Bell knew he truly couldn't match that speed, so he had to firmly stand his ground to defend against the attack. Because of that, he thus ended up taking some damage. He was cornered now. He simply couldn't escape the endless barrage of attacks. Slowly, surely, he was being overwhelmed by the creature, which menacingly advanced ever toward him, ready eagerly to have him as his afternoon snack. Suddenly remembering that he had just recently reincarnated, he couldn't simply allow his life to end so very soon. He had to quickly summon Achilles' shield. That way, he could effectively both defend and counterattack. However, the creature's sheer agility was formidable, and it caught him off guard. From the side, the boy fell down hard, losing his tight grip on the shield. The fight simply couldn't continue at this furious pace, or he would surely end up as that aggressive dog's very next meal. All the weapons he had used so far had been utterly, completely ineffective, and using the heavy hammer against it would also be difficult, since its own attacks were far too slow. Only one last weapon remained for him to try. With no real other choice, he had to use it immediately. The creature was now ready to finish him off for good. The boy closed his eyes, focusing intently. Just as he was about to be struck, he swiftly called Aegis forth to himself, but the creature's fierce attack had already been executed. Quite unexpectedly, miraculously, nothing happened. A new gauntlet was now in his hand, wrapped in pulsing dark energy. He truly hadn't wanted to use it, but it was far better than dying a horrible second time. The creature was now prepared to attack once more again. In fact, it had somehow become even faster still, but the battle was truly already all but over. The boy had also suddenly become so much faster. With his hammer firmly in hand, he was now above the creature. It simply wouldn't be able to keep up with him now at all, and the mighty hammer was already quite prepared to crush skulls. A single, precise and devastating blow then struck the creature, which now writhes in agony, its very teeth rearranging themselves within its mouth. Aegis was indeed the gauntlet of pure darkness, greatly increased the raw physical strength of its wielder. But no, that wasn't all. Whoever used it would soon begin to hear a sinister voice, giving them dark, constant orders to destroy. The wolf was somehow still alive and even more murderously furious. As time passed, the wielder only grew ever stronger, and his dark desire to take a life only intensified. He now eagerly awaited the creature's very next approach, easily dodging all the futile attacks coming his way. Now the wolf was at a clear, major disadvantage, and the boy almost seemed to be thoroughly enjoying this himself. At last, finally, the wolf no longer belonged to this world of the living. The protagonist was truly relieved to have ended it all so quickly. That cursed weapon couldn't just be removed in battle, and its dire effects only grew stronger over time. Now, he needed to understand precisely why there was a Fenrir in that forest. While he was thinking, he suddenly noticed something different about the hammer. It seemed to be completely charged with powerful energy. Simply by defeating the creature, he could now fully use its attributes. Defeating truly powerful creatures was better than taking down weak monsters. He couldn't wait to properly test it out. Nearby, in the castle garden, his younger sister enjoyed the afternoon under the shade of a tree. At long last, the flower crown was complete. She hoped her brother would truly like the gift. But suddenly, someone snatched the crown from her hands. The girl sneered, cruelly saying the flower crown was hideous. But that was perfectly fitting for a filthy girl like the one who made it. That wretched girl's true name was Jessica. She then wanted to know what Spencer thought about it. A rather bizarre-looking boy agreed with Jessica. He seemed to be there only to obey her. As she carelessly tossed the flower crown into the air, it was instantly destroyed. Spencer had used his whip to do it. Sarah didn't like that at all, but she was defenseless. Jessica was quite bored. There was nothing to do there. With a weapon already in hand, she invited Sierra to go with her. It was time for her to practice and improve her dreadful aim, firing a shot right at the girl who cowered in fear. Bell suddenly appeared, locking the shop with his sheath, boldly declaring that he would play with Jessica instead. Sierra was utterly shocked. She hadn't seen him arrive. In fact, she was completely unaware of anything, of her surroundings. She simply never noticed anyone coming. Bell coolly said. He was also looking for a good excuse to test his divine armament. But Jessica herself didn't understand what was happening. Absolutely no mutt was going to get in her way. Bell was far too busy trying to comfort his sister, telling her that everything would be fine. And now he had something important to take care of with the arrogant girl. The strange boy with the horrendous hair tried to position himself awkwardly in an intimidating stance. Bell could tell that this guy was some kind of servant to Jessica, so he made absolutely sure to stand before him as the son of the Duke. But he certainly wasn't about to show any respect to someone who was the son of a mere concubine. That only greatly irritated the protagonist. Jessica truly wanted to know just why he was so very confident, since he appeared weak and only got lucky really defeating Zane. Indeed, they fully believed our protagonist had just simply been lucky, believing that Zane had been far too careless there, and even since he was only using a mere sheath as his weapon, he must simply be the absolute weakest of all the weak here. Then closing his own eyes completely, he told her directly, it would be much better indeed if she could just see for herself now, whether surely what he had possessed was luck alone or true talent. Jessica simply hadn't quite expected any of this at all, and soon she became noticeably uneasy now, so ordering Spencer to take perfect care of that trash immediately right then, something which he would do indeed with great pleasure now, for wherever his dangerous whip directly struck, solid ice instantly formed. Even so, though Bell wasn't really impressed at all by this. Spencer was clearly a D-rank paladin, his divine armament just an ice whip. He was so much stronger really than that little jerk, who was only E-rank now. The clear protagonist was still the true protagonist here. The young boy said so confidently he would freeze his helpless victim's legs so he couldn't escape away, freezing then also his arms and his body until he simply couldn't move at all, ending all this then with such slaps to his poor face until it would be unrecognizable even then. Bell simply said indeed he talked just too much right there. And now, the rather minor side character simply would be reminded now that he was only his true side character. Spencer strongly warned him there not to underestimate him right then. Now you will turn surely him indeed into an ice one. Pop went then, the fierce whiplash right toward Bell there, but the young boy quite easily dodged it totally. Jessica simply couldn't believe he had managed really to do that there. For simply a D-rank paladin now, he really wasn't so bad there. But even so, he was just still truly a mere side character only. And clearly our protagonist had truly trained relentlessly in his very past life. This truly was nothing more at all than just a simple child's pastime then. Stella herself was even much more impressed now. Her own brother seemed right now to be gracefully dancing. Meanwhile, the angered Spencer became deeply irritated now, saying directly his victim only really knew how to merely run now. So Bell would properly show them right now that he wasn't running away at all. For from now properly on, he simply wouldn't dodge anymore at all then. Everyone right there was clearly shocked by such his overwhelming confidence. Bell simply wanted then to see if that arrogant young fool now really could properly follow through clearly on all his threats then. Spencer quickly fell right for that strong provocation and instantly charged to truly attack. For now, indeed, he would freeze him there truly completely over. The witch struck right then toward Bell directly, who just simply stood now there with his very arms wide open, for it hit him harshly now multiple more times then. But absolutely nothing happened, and Sarah became clearly very worried then. That strong ice finally properly formed, for his arms and his legs were now completely frozen really. For if surely he couldn't truly move, it was high time now for Spencer then to strike his poor face in then. Bell greatly wanted to truly know if that was all he could truly do then, because surely if it really was, then it simply was his true turn fully to attack there. Spencer hesitated notably there fully at those specific harsh words then. Bell rather immediately loudly called there, then directly for Ragnarok then. For the very sheath at his waist there properly began just to greatly glow then, and a true firearm fully appeared there in his very own hand then. To the highly arrogant young fool it was simply impossible surely that he now possessed even two true divine weapons right then, properly to break totally free there fully from such ice then. Bell clearly started releasing there his intense mana then, and directly from the powerful gun true fire instantly began to properly emerge then. And now fully he was simply free really to move again right then. Jessica clearly couldn't properly believe Bell had fully done that. It wasn't quite possible at all that he wielded two divine armaments ever, let alone surely that he could simply use their raw attributes quite so effectively here. Now indeed it was high time then to truly deliver raw punishment to this highly arrogant existence here. He then fired intense flames directly at Spencer. Spencer instantly knew he was in grave trouble. He quickly tried to defend himself using his own ice whip, completely coating his body in thick ice, believing that alone would be enough to block the approaching flames. Belle somehow knew this wouldn't even be particularly difficult. The searing fire kept relentlessly advancing. The fiery bullet completely pierced straight through that block of ice. Spencer simply couldn't believe he was about to be crushed so very violently. The burning projectile struck his chest with truly tremendous force. The sheer impact didn't actually pierce through him, but it surely caused considerable internal damage. He then fell to the ground. To Jessica's great horror, the mud had easily shattered the ice and defeated a mere E-rank paladin. And since she herself was only E-rank, she surely knew she had absolutely no chance at all. The young protagonist then looked at her. He calmly told her it was all completely over now. The terrified girl summoned her own divine armament. She desperately told him not to come any single step closer. The dreadful fear was so truly overwhelming that she couldn't even hold her weapon without visibly trembling. She then fired multiple desperate shots at him, but sadly missed every single last one. Utterly desperate. She begged him again not to come any closer, but still her feet were noticeably hesitant. She promptly fell on her own. As sheer fear was the most abundant thing in that place, Belle merely remained standing stoically before her. Jessica's profound fear continued to steadily grow. Before her stood someone who could easily end her life if he so wished. Firmly, then, he warned her never to bother Sierra again. The petrified girl couldn't even respond. She was utterly paralyzed. All she could possibly do was quickly flee, while she still had precious time. Sarah ran quickly up to her brother, extremely grateful. She immediately wanted to know if the nasty whip had truly hurt him, but he simply said Spencer was so pathetically weak. It was pitiful. Sarah naturally praised Belle's amazing strength, but he gently told her he was only strong so he could always protect her. She then showed him the new flower crown she had made, since the original other one had been cruelly destroyed. Gently placing it upon Belle's dark head, she sincerely thanked him for always being there to bravely protect her. Belle had now received a precious gift from his dear sister. One fine day, he would make the whole nation deeply revere this kind soul. The main problem was that everyone then despised the unfortunate children of concubines, and proving his true worth would be exceptionally difficult. He desperately needed to earn their respect, and for that reason, there was something important he had to achieve immediately. Outside the palace, there stood the stern Duke, deeply meditating while holding his trusty sword. His sheer concentration was indeed impressive. After some considerable time, he executed a few precise cuts in the air. He was easily able to slice through the many fallen leaves. Only then did he finally notice that Belle had quietly approached him. He then asked what the young boy wanted by coming to him. Belle had respectfully come to request the noble Duke's permission, somewhat interested. The Duke then asked what the boy wished to ask for, before actually making his formal request. He promptly knelt before the Duke. The Duke was quite impressed by such formality. Belle boldly wanted to take the challenging admission exam for C rank. The Duke seemed quite intrigued by the boy's bold request. Belle firmly said he wished to serve the king as a devoted member of his house, to thus ensure the duchy remained always recognized. His noble family had many obligations to the royal family, such tasks as escorting vital missions and eliminating many monsters. Doing this alone was the absolute fastest way for him to gain status, even within his very own family. That way he would surely earn recognition by completing many difficult tasks. To thereby obtain the very best missions, he absolutely needed to take this pivotal exam. Looking at the boy, the Duke then realized he had great, deep ambitions, but he also made it perfectly clear that it was still far too early for him to attempt that exam. He should definitely first become a true full-fledged paladin, before even remotely considering C rank, and at the present moment, he was only merely at F rank, having only just received his divine armament. He should properly focus on the E rank exam first. Instead, what the Duke really didn't expect was that the boy had something else to show him. Boldly presenting a large fang to him, Belle then asked if it was indeed enough to change his mind. The Duke knew instantly what that ominous thing was. It was a fearsome Fenrir fang, recognized immediately. He then asked how the young boy had obtained such a rare item. Without any hesitation, Belle showed him one of his own divine weapons. The mighty hammer was now visibly charged with intense, crackling electricity. Belle readily admitted it had been a little bit difficult, but he had somehow managed to discipline that truly stubborn mutt. Upon seeing the raw energy surrounding that powerful hammer, the Duke quickly realized the boy could indeed already use attributes. Moreover, he had even managed to defeat a fearsome D-rank creature. The young boy was truly quite strong and should be fully eligible for the C-rank exam. He would certainly allow the boy to take the important exam, under one single condition. He was absolutely not to even consider the mere possibility of disappointing the entire duchy. Now filled with great confidence and immense gratitude, Belle firmly assured him he truly never would. At the bustling exam site, he noticed several other candidates had already gathered. This This was mainly because C rank was a significant wall for so many people, seemingly completely insurmountable. In fact, the rather small boy quickly caught the wary attention of the other candidates. Many of them, indeed, were already grown adults, while he, by contrast, was just a mere child. He calmly made his way over to the exam reception desk. The busy attendant wanted to know exactly who he was, and if perhaps he was there with his own father, but then she was quite surprised to suddenly learn that he was there to take the exam himself, alone. She gently suggested he perhaps returned when he was much older. The young boy asked not to be treated merely like a child, as he was also a paladin. Just as they spoke, someone else approached Bell, rudely telling him to stop playing pretend as a real paladin. Little kids, such as him, shouldn't even be in this serious place. He really should leave, immediately so. The young protagonist had absolutely no idea what this new person's problem was, but he was quite sure it would soon be a problem. The other candidates there knew exactly who this imposing figure was. His actual name was Lennox, and he was currently the very strongest D-rank paladin. It was widely said that his unique divine armament, the legendary windsword, executed precisely 8 slashes every single time it was wielded. A truly impressive known ability. And he already had quite numerous fans. Lennox then warned that if the little child truly wanted to take the exam, he should at the very least be as good as him. Lennox. Bell didn't even really know this particular guy was famous among his peers. Meanwhile, this arrogant new side character seriously doubted whether the young protagonist even truly had a divine armament, confidently holding the simple sheath at his waist. Bell calmly said it was right there, always with him. Upon seeing that it was, in fact, just a mere sheath, the arrogant young man began to loudly laugh, openly thinking it must be utterly impossible to fight with such apparent trash. Other nearby side characters then started laughing loudly as well. They had never imagined that divine armaments could possibly be so very useless, and they were truly grateful they themselves weren't nearly as pathetic. Lennox then said he didn't particularly care if an ignorant mere child wanted to foolishly throw his young life away just like that, but it greatly annoyed him, nonetheless, that his mere participation in the exam somehow put them on the very same level, as if they were actual equals. Taking his haughty leave, he then warned that the little piece of trash should quickly return to his own mother's lap. With that very annoying little session now over, Bell told the secretary to please register him immediately. She still wanted to know if he was absolutely sure about this, but he was quite unwavering for that, however. He actually needed a valid recommendation from a B-rank knight, or even higher, as well as already being at least D-rank himself. Personally, with that important recommendation letter, however, he should surely be able to participate, thus resolving all potential issues. The young girl knew that it was extremely highly unlikely that anyone at all would ever recommend a mere child. But as she carefully read the letter, she suddenly realized it actually came from the feared Duke of Catastrophe himself. Only then, truly, did she finally realize that the small child before her was also the great Duke's own son. The various participants then gathered inside the vast arena, the very place where the difficult exam would soon take place. The main instructor began giving out instructions on how exactly the exam would work. First, they would all be transported directly into a dangerous dungeon, using that powerful, glowing teleportation stone. They would then have exactly 5 hours to safely return with a precious jewel of light. In total, there were only 3 of them hidden inside the dark dungeon. Only those few who actually managed to obtain the rare jewels would be duly promoted. The particularly arrogant side character was utterly convinced he was somehow destined to be one of the lucky winners. The other competition before him looked quite intimidated, while the young protagonist simply felt rather embarrassed on his behalf. After the full explanation, the instructor then asked if everyone was finally ready. Upon seeing the clearly enthusiastic response from the entire group, the important exam was now officially set to begin. Immediately, it was then the protagonist's own turn to enter the foreboding dungeon. Directly through the shimmering teleportation stone, the ancient rooms began to suddenly glow very intensely, and he quickly found himself instantly transported to a completely different unknown place. It was almost as if he had just passed through a mystical portal. He was now finally deep inside the dark cave. It certainly seemed that everyone else had been sent to vastly different locations, all on the very first floor. So he urgently needed to decide which specific road to take. Although the entire dungeon was indeed large, he still had plenty of valuable time to successfully complete it. And since he now had the golden opportunity, it would surely be a terrible waste not to make the absolute best use of it. There were undoubtedly many dangerous creatures lurking in this dungeon, and the more savage monsters he successfully defeated, the significantly greater his own mana would eventually become. Immediately then, he firmly gripped his trusty sword, fully determined to swiftly hunt down every single creature that existed there, deep inside the perilous dungeon. The other hapless candidates were already struggling badly to defeat the lurking creatures. They were truly formidable and also highly dangerous foes. The piercing eyes of those scaly lizards were utterly terrifying and quite violent, certainly more than enough to easily intimidate the truly weak. The quite arrogant side character simply didn't understand why the others were struggling so. Against such clearly weak creatures, he alone could annihilate them with a wide, smug grin, as it obviously didn't require much true effort on his part. His easy feats earned him the swift admiration of the others, and he continued to defeat the monsters, ever overconfident. He boldly declared that he wasn't mediocre like all the rest. To be quite honest, he found the current difficulty rather frustrating. The other side characters were quite happy to follow him closely, as they would surely remain safe accompanied by one so strong. Arrogant Lennox proudly warned that they would soon have the distinct privilege of witnessing his awesome skills directly, firsthand, and proclaimed that weaklings like them were only good for merely wandering around. After diligently exploring the dark dungeon for some while, the small group encountered a truly massive stone door. That certainly must be the final, foreboding chamber. He truly hoped he could find some real entertainment within. Quite unexpectedly, there were multiple D-rank monsters inside that place, and the bright jewels were positioned on an altar at the far end of the room. One of the grim creatures began slowly walking toward the tense group. Lennox was entirely confident he could easily slice it to many pieces, delivering multiple swift slashes toward the advancing monster. But its body was so incredibly tough and quite resilient that it took no damage at all. Now it was time for the fearsome creature to fiercely counterattack. For the very first time in this perilous dungeon, the once arrogant side character suddenly found himself under immense, real pressure from one of these monsters. The crushing blow was so very strong that he nearly lost his balance, but he was utterly shocked that his fierce attacks had absolutely no effect at all. Even the other stunned side characters couldn't quite believe what was truly happening. They all immediately became terribly worried, because the other foul creatures had now fully focused upon them. The young guy from Clava had to act very quickly to save his own precious life. He somehow managed to strike one of the monsters fiercely attacking him, only to quickly realize that mere physical attacks were totally useless. Against its hard shell, meanwhile, the lone woman was desperately struggling against the agile flying creature. This quite particular monster could swiftly attack with its razor-sharp feathers, without even really needing to get up close. Lennox at last finally realized the true difficulty level of this daunting final exam stage. Indeed, there was a monster fully capable of resisting each of their vaunted, unique divine abilities. Against that specific stone creature, he found he was utterly ineffective. Utterly terrified and quite unable to properly act, he simply closed his eyes, grimly expecting the absolute worst. But then the terrifying creature was instantly destroyed, before it could even land a fatal blow on the helpless candidate. He slowly opened his wide eyes, still deep in utter shock. Bell was indeed relieved, if he had come only a bit later. The absolute, grim worst would surely have happened. He admitted he had quite a bit of actual fun while out hunting, but then Lennox immediately recognized him there at once. It was that pathetic little piece of trash also taking the exam. A new monster, immune to physical attacks, was fast approaching him. Bell knew he had to quickly change strategies to properly deal with that specific creature. His trusty sword was the truly ideal, perfect weapon for this foe. Lennox was greatly surprised that the young boy's divine armament had actually suddenly transformed. Bell deftly finished off that tough, resilient creature with a single, clean strike. Next he had to properly deal with the one still flying high in the air. He already had the perfect, specialized equipment ready for that. A unique weapon capable of firing off multiple quick, deadly shots, swiftly riddling the airborne creature's entire body with many bullets. He effectively turned it into a mere useless winged sieve. On the other side, the side characters still couldn't quite believe that the new boy was truly so very strong, especially considering that his known, initial divine armament was just an empty, plain sheath. Lennox truly had no real, conceivable idea how it was even possible for him alone to somehow possess multiple, powerful divine armaments. Not to even mention the quiet boy apparently had immense, natural mastery over each single one. Since precious time itself was short, he knew he had to finish off all the remaining creatures very quickly. Merely watching dumbfounded from the safe sidelines, the formerly arrogant side character, Lennox, simply couldn't fathom that a mere child could be this incredibly, overwhelmingly skilled, while he still remained deep in stunned shock. Our main protagonist calmly continued defeating all the hostile creatures, with absolutely everything now fully taken care of. He then just needed to safely collect one of the prized, shining jewels. He at last finally reached the high stone altar where they were carefully positioned. The other, humbled side characters sheepishly approached him then, obviously ready to promptly start their usual fawning flattery session, something our protagonist always found incredibly dull and most annoying. They quickly, predictably revealed their truly toxic, fickle nature by suddenly, callously belittling the very one they had been fawningly worshipping just mere moments ago. Now they eagerly said that compared to this amazing, powerful child, Lennox was utter trash, and they had clearly always been quite wrong about him. Lennox's entire, fragile confidence had been irrevocably shattered by that harsh experience. The two-faced, fickle side characters now firmly believed they would surely claim the remaining 2 jewels, without saying a single word. Bell summoned his hammer. He had already obtained the truly necessary jewel for his own approval, and he was quite ready to do something very entertaining. He then struck the altar with a powerful, decisive blow, to the utter shock of the two groveling side characters. They demanded what the hell he had just done. He had completely destroyed the remaining jewels, showing them now the only jewel left. He boldly told them that if they wanted it so badly, they just simply had to come and get it, adding pointedly that besides being utterly useless, they were just mere sycophants who leeched off other people's actual talent, people who took pleasure in belittling those who were no longer useful to them. They were wholly unworthy of calling themselves knights. Being harshly scolded by a child utterly devastated their fragile egos. Bell then left the room, abandoning the side characters right there. Lennox, however, seemed to have learned something important from that reprimand. He readily recognized his own weaknesses, admitting frankly that he had been arrogant, and thanked Bell for it. But still, he wouldn't let that be his ultimate downfall. The young protagonist found it quite surprising that he had been so honest, and still had ambitions. Confirming that one day they would surely meet again. Outside, the young boy celebrated. He was finally a C-rank knight, and since he had hunted so many monsters, his mana had increased quite significantly. Now, he just really needed to gain respect within his own household, to be truly able to protect his dear sister. At long last, he arrived at the Duke's residence to share the great news, but the Duke himself seemed to be in the middle of a serious, urgent meeting. There were apparently knights planning to overthrow the Melia family. 3 dangerous B-ranked paladins were approaching their very lands, and the Duke's own family had been tasked with eliminating them. It clearly seemed that another noble family had previously had trouble with these said paladins. Ruver then suggested that these knights had likely enchanted their weapons with dark, forbidden spells. The assembled B-ranked paladins now understood why they had been summoned there. The Duke firmly declared that they could not possibly allow karma to continue on like this. They absolutely had to eradicate them immediately. One of the present knights noticed someone important was missing. Jin, it seemed, wasn't there with them. Placing a heavy book on the table, a young man calmly asked what the current meeting was about. Immediately, all the others turned to see who it was. The confident young man declared that this troublesome organization had already been completely annihilated, because he himself, the one who would become the next Duke, would be the sole reason for it. Meanwhile, elsewhere, one of the maids was bringing a meal to her young lady, informing her gently that the food had now arrived. Sarah quietly prepares to sit at the table. Being very polite indeed, she thanked the woman for her diligent work, who then left the room, not giving any real importance to this gratitude. Sarah, poor girl, seems to be very sad. She merely looks at her meal without any visible enthusiasm. Finally then, her brother enters the room, announcing cheerfully that he had arrived. He fondly looks at her with great, evident joy. Sarah visibly responds in the very same way. She does not know where he had gone off to, and was very much worried. Bell kindly informed her that he had to take care of something rather important, and also that he brought some gifts for her. On the small table now lies a complete, wonderful meal. Sarah was especially very happy with the fresh apple pie that had been brought, and she dearly hopes to eat all of it in the warm company of her brother. That, however, is not the time to properly enjoy his sister's company. The provided food is always the exact same. Since even the household servants despise the children of concubines, he urgently needs to work very hard to improve his sister's quality of life. Immediately thereafter, the meeting with the Duke is still in active progress. He is clearly impressed that one of his own sons managed to defeat Karma entirely alone. This remarkable feat can only mean that Jin has already reached level A, as truly expected from the Duke's eldest son. He is on another distinct level. After hearing that, he also sat down at the table. He now wants to know if his respected father has anything else important to say. He then said that the king had assigned yet another task to their noble family. They were now to escort Princess Rilke Schurdevillen. She apparently would pass through a city quite near the duchy, and they should absolutely ensure her a completely safe journey. One of the knights present wondered if the royal guard itself was not enough. Another one said that the royal family should not yet actually be informed that Karma itself was no longer a present problem. Thus, the decidedly safest route should definitely pass through Ricarda. While they were still talking, another young person entered the grand hall. The young boy asked them to please wait before making a final decision. His sudden appearance caught everyone's immediate attention. The knights all know that this is young Bell. The Duke himself could not deny that he was very much pleased with his son's emerging talent. It certainly seemed that the difficult exam was already over. Proudly showing his new certificate, the young boy confirmed that he now officially belonged to level C. It is truly impressive that he achieved this at such a tender age. Now then, the Duke wanted to know precisely why he interrupted them. He merely wanted to suggest a far different route for this journey. One of the knights was quite surprised that a mere boy had something to suggest. The known route that passes through Rakata has virtually no monsters, which is exactly why there are so very many bandits, and consequently, the journey would take fully 3 days. It would be much better if the trip passed through the dreaded monster plain. One of the knights promptly warned that that place was undeniably dangerous. But the young boy knows well the monsters that inhabit that very region. Most of them are fearsome chimeras and horrors of the deep dark. Both are indeed nocturnal creatures. So naturally, traveling during the day would be significantly safer. Not to even mention, it would take only a mere single day to reach their destination. The older knight, unfortunately, had to reluctantly agree with this after listening to the young boy. The Duke then realized that he was quite assertive and knew a great deal about monsters. Now there only remained to be seen what they all thought of it, because the determined boy wanted to be solely entrusted with this vital task. He was utterly confident that he could escort the princess quite safely. His firm stance made the Duke remain deeply thoughtful. Finally then, Jin made his chilling participation in the dialogue. A threatening, palpable energy filled the entire air. He coldly wanted to know why this mere mutt was even speaking to them. The oppressive energy was so very intense that even a nearby plant on the table ended up instantly drying out, and consequently, the other knights became visibly fearful. Young Bell had almost forgotten how truly terrifying his older brother's intimidation was, yet even so, that still was not enough to truly intimidate him. Then, revealing his divine armament, he declared that he was also quite serious, firmly affirming that he would be able to escort the princess perfectly safely to her final destination, no matter what. Clearly intrigued by the boy's sheer confidence, Jin then asked if he would actually be able to stop him. Bell resolutely affirmed that a true knight keeps his word. In sermon, Razor then ordered the boy to shut his mouth, as his bold words represented sheer blasphemy against Lord Jin. This indeed was Razor, his older brother's loyal secretary, who by now must surely be a level B paladin. Jin himself seemed very much interested in the young boy, and so, he asked his secretary to promptly put him to the test. Then Razor also revealed his own divine armament, for he was fully prepared to thoroughly beat that mere child. He was certainly going to teach a harsh lesson to the son of a concubine. Immediately then, he began to take menacing steps toward the boy, who nevertheless seemed very acutely aware of his surroundings. Even though he had not yet moved, the determined secretary was just about to deliver the very first strike. Bell quickly realized that this could be much more truly difficult than expected. Even so, somehow he was able to defend himself quite efficiently, something that clearly left the attacking secretary rather impressed. Jin also seemed to genuinely like what he had just seen. That certainly was faster than previously expected. It is still far too early for him to actually defeat a level B paladin in direct combat. Then, firmly and most authoritatively, the Duke loudly announced that that was quite enough, decisively affirming that Bell would indeed be responsible for that crucial task. The astonished secretary asked if the Duke was truly serious about this, since mighty karma had already been completely annihilated by Jin. This would be a very interesting task for a very first mission. Bell most respectfully thanked him profusely, steadfastly affirming that he would certainly not disappoint. Jin is watching the young boy quite attentively, but his deeply sinister smile clearly hides something. Now, Bell needed to go to the Grand Royal Palace. This is the very first time he has ever actually been to that majestic place. He confidently heads to the main gates to make his formal entrance, but he is promptly stopped by the vigilant guards, who sternly say he cannot simply just walk in. The young boy calmly introduces himself, proudly showing his official paladin certificate, and clearly informs them that he is solely responsible for escorting the princess. They obviously have great difficulty, believing that such a mere child has already actually reached level C. Once properly identified, he was finally able to pass through the imposing gates. The guards still doubt the young child is truly capable of protecting Her Highness, but our protagonist remains absolutely, completely determined. Finally then, the princess's grand carriage arrives. She playfully said that her new bodyguard is very, very cute. She then apologized to him, politely confirming that she would not really need his help. Meanwhile, the man sitting upon the throne coolly wants to know if the princess has already indeed departed. His loyal servant confirms that she must already now be on the road. Besides having several guards in her esteemed company, the Duke's own son is also officially part of her escort. He further heard that this particular son is Bell, who must still only be a mere child. Correctly imagining that he must be exceptionally talented, he ominously asked his servant to be exceedingly cautious, grimly authorizing him to use his deadly secret weapon, if the dire situation ever called for it. Then revealing sharp blades in his hands, he confidently stated that there would be absolutely no need, because his dark specialty is precisely eliminating people, without them ever even realizing it. The grand carriage continues steadily on its way. Within are the princess, our protagonist, and also the guards. That specific task is very simple, yet of truly great importance. Completing it successfully is essential to helping his beloved sister. But indeed, there is a definite catch to this. He truly does not feel comfortable at all. It surely seems he has not been so well received. then excusing himself for what might be a rather rude question. He simply wanted to know why the princess said he would not be truly necessary. She then takes a brief moment to answer, saying that she does not particularly like to depend upon others. She has her own divine armament and is truly not as weak as people imagine. The boy soon realized that she is even more arrogant than he had first thought. The young princess continues looking wistfully outside. Inside the vast city, life still goes on as usual. That sight seems to have truly sparked something within the princess. She now looks outside with such great enthusiasm. The boy quietly enjoys seeing her sudden joy, but the princess clearly felt quite uncomfortable with that. He apologized, also stating that she reminds him a real lot of his sister, and he is quite sure she would have reacted in much the same way. Looking at all that, the princess then asked if they usually get along very well. Belle told her that they indeed play a whole lot when they are together, since she is, of course, still very young. Games are simple things, the princess also said, and that she has many siblings, but still cannot trust any one of them. Dire conflicts over succession. Belle felt genuinely sorry for her. He said that in his very own household, he too goes through a quite similar situation. His own siblings often persecute them for being just children of a concubine. Since his beloved mother is now deceased, there is absolutely no one to protect them. The princess actually seemed interested in that. Belle suggested that she must feel quite the same, and could surely confide in him if she ever felt comfortable. But she absolutely does not want to depend on anyone, much less indeed on someone like him. The boy truly does not know what her dire situation is, and merely assuming that he understands, something like that was disrespectful. Along the dark road outside the walls, they are clearly being watched. Night at last fell upon them. They swiftly reached their destination in just one day, exactly as planned, but for the young princess, it had been terribly exhausting. The massive gates open and she is then received. Only she does not truly know who this strange young man is. His actual name is Peter, one of the royal knights of that kingdom, and he declared they are truly happy to finally welcome her. Belle had indeed heard of this Peter before, but could not fully recall at that very moment, and he found it quite strange that they were thus received outside the city. Those who had skillfully prepared the ambush were quite ready to act, and the princess's own entourage remained still outside. The sharp boy noticed that there were indeed many guards there, but it was nevertheless suspicious. A sharp dagger was thrown right at them. Belle instinctively knew that the princess would be an easy target far outside the castle. He deftly managed to react quickly, protecting her with his divine armament. She and her own guards were instantly startled. An obvious enemy attack was underway, and the princess was the prime target. Several deadly daggers had been thrown towards her. Since there were quite many, this could prove a major problem. Peter too was also prepared to act. With his great sword skills, he bravely managed to protect the princess. He swore he would not let anything happen to her. Witnessing what the skilled knight was capable of, Belle then assumed he must be at least at level B. The vile assassins needed to quickly flee. The treacherous ambush had not been fully completed. Peter quickly ordered his knights to pursue those fleeing men, while the princess herself would be escorted far from the castle. Belle purposefully remained outside while the princess was hastily taken away. She glanced back, now quite apprehensive. Safely inside, they informed her that she was finally safe, but the princess boldly stated that she was quite capable of defending herself. Even while the knight was vowing that he would protect her, his very throat was slit. The princess, who had not instantly noticed the attack, was utterly, deeply frightened. The true one responsible for that heinous action was Peter himself. Now she realized that the gravest danger was right beside her. He merely looked at the loyal guard who had just lost his life. His ultimate sacrifice had been totally in vain. The terrified princess did not know what was truly going to happen now. Peter cruelly told her that her own life would end in a few brief moments. Despite having once said that she could indeed defend herself, the princess was truly, completely defenseless. The traitorous knight slowly, menacingly approached her. She was so incredibly terrified that she could not even summon her divine armament. Peter fully revealed himself to be a vile degenerate, wearing a most horrifying smile. The princess urgently now needed someone truly capable of saving her. The very window of the room was abruptly shattered. Peter was quite surprised by what then just happened. One of his loyal men had been instantly eliminated, and the mere boy responsible for her escort was the one who actually did it. Of all the truly possible people to take such action, it was not the particular boy that the princess had been expecting. He simply apologized for being so late. The young boy finally, coolly stepped down from the window, calmly looking at the princess. He informed her that, from this point on, this perilous job was now his sole responsibility. Peter had wrongly assumed that, strategically, his other guards would surely take the bait outside. He simply did not believe the mere boy would be capable of defeating him. And at last, the protagonist fully remembered who this treacherous person was. But Peter himself ended up extremely confused. His true, real name was indeed von Riegel. This incredible fact left the knight utterly surprised. He had never imagined that the young child knew all that. If his special divine armament consisted of just 2 combinations, with his 3 thunder dice, Thus far, he had managed to eliminate several counts, even completely bringing down a fearsome marquis. Truly impressed by the small child. He desperately wanted to know how he had somehow discovered all this in his own past life. He was the very one responsible for bringing him ultimate justice, which is exactly why he knew all these specific details. The boy had never imagined that he would foolishly go after the princess one day, but now indeed, he would not escape his certain fate. Even though he was merely just a child, Peter still felt quite intimidated by him. But he nevertheless acknowledged that it was a truly interesting situation. Even if he had been somehow investigated by this mere child, the boy would surely never be able to defeat a level B paladin. And indeed it could be a truly insurmountable challenge for him. But if his opponent was actually Peter, he would not have any real difficulty. Annoyed by the protagonist's sheer audacity, he said he would make him regret those very words. The boy somehow already knew that Peter would start by throwing his weapons, and that was indeed exactly what he did. With his set of daggers, the boy deftly dodged all of them without difficulty, because he already knew that his opponent would launch a quick surprise attack, executing a swift diagonal slash with his right hand. Peter was utterly astonished that he had missed all his attacks, but the protagonist already knew he would try to surprise him again. Right from behind, his hand was already quickly prepared to summon his divine armament, and with his swift sword he managed to block the surprise attack. He somehow already knew all those moves. Peter did not quite understand how that mere little piece of human filth could match his speed. Bell said he could easily finish him off at any moment. So if he valued his own life, he had better surrender now. But his opponent was now overcome with deep rage, feeling deeply underestimated. He warned that he would turn that brat into very tiny pieces with his anger. His attacks then became even more predictable. That was his fatal weakness. Guided by his fury, he delivered multiple swift strikes, but none of them were actually able to reach the child. The princess was truly impressed by his combat skills. Even though he was so small, he was fighting a deadly assassin as if it were something simple. He deftly silenced all those attacks. The princess suddenly realized that in truth, she talked far too much. The ring on one of her fingers soon began to glow, and the protagonist, now clearly out of patience, announced that he would finally put an end to this once and for all. The first attack he struck against his opponent was truly effective. Peter had been wounded. He now needed to rethink his attack strategy. He realized that all his movements were somehow being read. Things were happening just as his boss had indeed warned. That boy might be truly extremely talented, or there could be something more about him. So he should not be too careless. Facing the sheer difficulty, he decided to use his greatest trump card. The protagonist was well aware of this. He would use his special ability, an impenetrable barrier of light, and he told him that this was really no problem at all, as he would be surely able to overcome this challenge. Peter believed the boy was merely being foolishly arrogant, so he then began to open that small vial. Even well knowing what it might be, the protagonist visibly grew worried. Those were the fabled tears of the Dragon King. After throwing them down to the ground, it seemed as if he had used some kind of powerful stimulant. That was a very rare item that multiplied the user's mana for only a brief period of time. Peter said he would make the child sorely regret not being cautious. He threw his daggers again, but this time it was different. They were now noticeably much more powerful, and the boy needed to be extra careful, because now he was completely surrounded by all those blades. It had suddenly stopped in the air, now completely encircling him. Peter believed his victory would now finally happen, because the boy had been firmly imprisoned inside a barrier of light. He felt his body being powerfully lifted into the air through magnetism. The princess grew deeply worried about her bodyguard. He had to use his strong shield to try to break free. Using the full power of the shield, he fiercely attempted to obliterate the barrier, but the wind his weapon produced was just not strong enough. Peter was not yet done demonstrating his abilities. His daggers began to glow even more brightly with an electric radiance. Crackling energy coursed through the entire barrier. Inside it, the boy writhed helplessly in agony. Peter said he would make this stage very quick. Almost losing consciousness now, the boy realized he could not hold on, unlike that strength. While he was weakened, suddenly arrows began to fly across the room. They were aimed precisely at the daggers. This action caused the barrier to be completely destroyed. Only then did Peter fully realize what was happening. The princess had finally managed to use her divine armament. That brave paladin was risking his own life to save her. She could not simply remain afraid forever. Her bold intervention only made Peter even angrier. He fiercely lunged at his victim to finish the job. And now the princess was overtaken by sudden fear. But the protagonist only truly needed that small amount of help. Finally, the assassin clearly understood that he was in deep trouble. His body was then struck by a deep and very effective blow. It was quite enough to render him utterly incapacitated. Bell had now won that duel. His opponent's body promptly collapsed to the ground. Completely still motionless. Once recovered, he gently asked if the princess was perhaps hurt, with a truly sad expression in her eyes. She said absolutely nothing to him. She merely approached the boy, gently touching his face. She softly told him that he was the only one actually injured in that room. Sincerely apologizing, she said, that he had been so involuntarily caught up in the royal succession conflict, but the boy quickly assured her that this was really no problem. In actual fact, the princess was as truly strong as she had claimed to be, to which she then replied that she was not nearly as strong as her bodyguard. Being very grateful for his timely help, she kindly told him that if he ever truly needed it, she would certainly stand up for him, humbly kneeling. The boy expressed his deep gratitude for the princess's help. She then looked at him with such great admiration, gently removing the ring from her own finger. She earnestly wished for him to keep the precious small artifact, as a sincere token of her gratitude and lasting friendship. Belle knew quite exactly what that artifact truly was. That was certainly no ordinary ring. Finally, the vital mission had been completed entirely without casualties. He was then received by the Duke. He then attentively listened to everything that had since happened during the princess's escort. Belle clearly stated that he had most successfully completed the task, but the shrewd Duke noticed that there was indeed something more to it. On one of the young boy's fingers was the legendary Ring of Solomon. It had been freely given to him by the princess as a sure sign of her trust in him. This was a truly valuable artifact, one of the esteemed royal family's greatest treasures, a potent source of mana. It was quite unbelievable that the mere boy had obtained such a prized artifact. He might be even far more impressive than the Duke had ever imagined. Fully realizing this, he could not possibly hide his immense satisfaction. He then informed the boy that he would promptly enlist him in Athens immediately. He had not at all expected to receive this sudden news, because that was a most elite academy for paladins. Its very access was strictly exclusive to noble families. Most other members of his family were usually educated by private tutors. Ancient tradition dictated that only the potential successors of the family ever attended the academy. This could only truly mean that he was now firmly in the race to become the next heir. The Duke sternly ordered him to continue rigorous training until he was officially notified about the impending start of his classes. The young boy still had something more to say, and his powerful father wanted to know precisely what it was. Standing tall before him, he remained quite firm because he had a special request to make. Now the great doors opened. He was soon already outside the grand hall with his dear sister, who was so very happy. She simply cannot believe that this is her wonderful new room. Her own bed is now so much more comfortable. It was the great Duke himself who graciously gave permission for this. He actually requested that they both move into the main house, as this would further contribute to earning the due respect of others. The young girl cannot possibly hide how truly happy she is. She then notices something slightly different about the boy's hand. There was a fresh small wound on it. He calmly said that he got somewhat injured on his last task. Knowing this clearly made her a little bit worried, but very soon they happily went back to playing. That somehow made him feel even much better. Sweet Sarah would definitely be very well taken care of from now on. Now he truly needs to focus intently on his future, because in just 5 years a terrible catastrophe will surely happen. His dear sister could be in grave danger once again, and he urgently needs to gather crucial information to find out exactly who is ultimately responsible for it. And to truly do so, he absolutely must become the next heir of his family. Jin's loyal servant quietly goes to his room to report something urgent. He deeply bows, patiently waiting for permission, but Jin coolly remains focused entirely on his intricate painting, staying so deeply concentrated upon it. The humble servant then reported that the so-called bastard brother would soon be sent to Athena Academy. He was the very first one since Jin himself. They really should eliminate him right immediately, but Jin had absolutely no real interest in that. He calmly put his delicate painting aside for a brief moment. He coolly stated that his younger brother posed no actual threat for now. His brother's eventual growth would be quite advantageous as well, because there was indeed something he truly enjoyed doing. His loyal servant was quite surprised by that. Jin then revealed himself to be a truly twisted degenerate, who greatly enjoys crushing things only after they have fully developed, given that it would all be done exactly as he wished. Even though his cruel master had already clearly given the order, he still considered this a very risky strategy. The young boy had multiple powerful divine weapons, and had already somehow managed to defeat a strong level B paladin. He urgently needed to make his decisive move immediately, purely out of sheer precaution. Belle was already outside, diligently training. He truly needed to develop his unique abilities, and it would be most ideal to hone them before entering the academy. The only problem was that to do this, he would surely have to hunt countless monsters. Through the very reflection of his sword, he then saw that his brother's servant was approaching. He clearly needed to stay alert to this sudden approach. The strange man was getting ever closer to him, addressing him with great formality, something he did not quite expect from someone supposedly hostile. Knowing full well he was his brother's servant, he simply asked what he wanted. There indeed he was, apologizing for what happened the other day, because it was profoundly disrespectful to even point his blade at one of the Duke's sons. Our protagonist thought that perhaps he might be a good person, and considering all that, he asked him not to worry about the past. He sincerely thanked the boy for his kindness. He then said he had something else to discuss with him. The young boy was still holding his sword, and the servant then wanted to know if he would like to accompany him on a dangerous monster subjugation mission, an extremely unusual task. He mentioned that his master, Jin, and all the other paladins were planning something else. He was quite impressed with the boy's performance and wanted to help him. This was indeed a very strange invitation. He could not possibly refuse it, since he was the Duke's son, but he clearly recognized that he needed to be cautious. He finally said that he would accept the invitation, and the older man thanked him deeply, because he secretly planned to eliminate him during this very task. Our protagonist asked where exactly they would be going. It was a far remote place called Ika, and he knew perfectly exactly what kind of place that was. He had almost forgotten, but it was the perfect place to use a very special method to increase his mana. Ambrosia itself was a rare item that permanently increased the user's mana. The old carriage set off toward the location for the monster eradication. Our protagonist was now inside it, quite eager to eliminate some foul creatures, while also thinking how great it would be to get some ambrosia. But alas, the chances of obtaining it were slim. To even do so, he needed to enter a hidden dungeon, and he actually knew the location of one of these hidden dungeons, because it would soon appear near that city called Ethica. Since it was already deep nighttime, they surely needed to find lodging. The older man would pass along the necessary instructions. They urgently needed to eradicate some leviathans. They had been duly informed that several of them were in that location. They were mere level C monsters. Since it was already quite late, they would therefore start at dawn the next day and needed rest for that. The young boy said he would go to his room. As he slowly climbed the stairs, he was being watched. That man thought he was an utter idiot who did not know what was happening. He would surely make everything look like an unexpected accident. No matter how truly talented he was still only at level C. It would be easy to take him out, once safely in his room. He assumed that Razor must already be asleep. He quickly summoned his shield, using his wind magic through the window, that then allowed the artifact to be used in an unexpected way, transforming it into a platform capable of flying. The fabled hidden dungeon was located deep within the monster forest. He and his own master found it a long, long time ago, but now no one knows its exact location. Finally, the young boy's feet touch the ground as his artifact disappears. He correctly imagines that he has located the dungeon. Right before him is a small dark entrance. The brave boy begins to explore its dark interior, soon coming across a massive glowing portal. That was precisely exactly what he was looking for. These hidden dungeons can be distinguished by their gate color. The ominous blue ones are level A, a vibrant green gate is level B, and upon completion, you will always receive ambrosia equivalent to the dungeon's own level. That will surely definitely help him a great lot. The young boy is now prepared to enter the gate. He only needs to defeat the dungeon's final boss creature. In his grim past life, he faced it while only at level D. His own master had warned him then that it was too early, and it might possibly still be difficult for him now. But he absolutely cannot retreat just because of mere fear. He slowly placed his hand right inside the gate, finally passing through it. He keenly thought about how he needed to get stronger as quickly as humanly possible. Deep inside the dungeon, he was already battling the very first creature, but it surprisingly did not seem challenging enough. He carefully observed the movements of that menacing phantom knight, which was clearly prepared to advance and attack once more. It delivered swift and very precise strikes, but the brave boy was able to keep defending himself, and in bravely doing so, he found an opening in the fierce attack, striking the dark knight while it was completely unguarded. But alas, his strike was not nearly enough to defeat it. On the very contrary, the sheer force of the impact threw the boy backward. He quickly needed to switch weapons, and now he wielded the mighty warhammer, with it firmly in his hands. He managed to land another powerful blow, yet still, the dreadful creature remained unscathed. Mere physical attacks were not nearly enough to destroy that strange armor. It was clearly up to him to try another desperate strategy, using his trusty sword once more. He made his sharp blade shine. He was going to attack using pure magic. The magical strikes hit the armor. Even so, they utterly failed to cause any real damage. He had truly never seen a creature quite like that before, but he also understood that he was still only at mere level C. Once more again, he was pressured by the Phantom Knight's fierce attacks, at a grave disadvantage. He needed to think of another strategy, immediately. If such a creature had a shield, it most certainly must have a hidden weakness. And our boy seemed to have finally figured something out. A special mana-coated bullet should do the job. Now he was also including Fire Spit. He swiftly began charging the very attack that he would fire, and the relentless Phantom Knight kept advancing in his very direction. Only 2 mere seconds remained for it to be fully ready. The fearsome creature was getting closer and ever closer, until it was already quite enraged to injure him. Finally, then, when the distance became short enough, his powerful attack was fully charged. The burning shot was fired at the armor, proving itself to be truly effective. It was incredibly powerful enough to destroy the armor. The dark creature fell to the ground, as it had been subdued. The young boy also collapsed, due to the recoil of the shot. With the hard battle over, he exhaled deeply in sheer relief. A potent magical attack was the creature's only weakness. It just always needed to be strong enough. If you had not luckily possessed a divine weapon like that, you would surely have been in serious trouble. The actual dungeon boss must be truly terrifying, but that much was expected of a hidden dungeon. Even so, still, obtaining very rare items from those monsters was a great opportunity. That special potion could restore his stamina and also mana. The tired boy drank it immediately, as he needed strength to continue, and that was precisely exactly what he did, destroying each and every creature in his path, until he at last finally arrived where he wanted. Behind that truly enormous gate must be the strongest creature. He did not quite know if it would be a demon or a gigantic serpent, but he was surely about to find out. Finally, then, he entered the main hall. It strongly resembled some sort of arena. The young boy started hearing strange sounds before him. A dark shadow appeared, resembling a tall knight. His whole body started to shiver, and his mouth became dry. The immense pressure was simply overwhelming, and the very creature his eyes beheld was truly dangerous. His evil eyes glowed with an intensely bright scarlet color. The terrifying knight slowly approached. It was most certainly the dungeon's final boss creature. He was now preparing to face that truly terrifying monster. The brave boy needed to stay completely alert. The menacing phantom knight looked at its dark sword, swiftly then moving its weapon. Certainly a devastating attack was about to begin in the blink of an eye. The young boy needed to react fast, or his desperate fight would end much sooner than he expected. The sudden destruction that followed was utterly overwhelming. Young Bell managed to gain a bit of distance, but he still then had to dodge the crushing blows. If he were ever hit by any of those attacks, it would be instantly fatal once again. The vile creature turned toward him, forcing the poor boy to leap far away. That quick moment was the opportunity he needed to summon his sword. Now, finally, he could attack as well. Finding a small opening, he struck the phantom knight in the back, but its thick armor was much denser than he had ever expected. Once more again, he would have great difficulty breaking through that hard steel. The weary boy had no real time to think. He desperately needed to stay focused on his dodging. He then decided to try the same strategy that had proven effective earlier, using his trusty fire spitter. This was the very best strategy he had. This particular time, he would charge the attack for much, much longer. A grand total of 5 long seconds. He still just needed a bit more time to charge the attack. And then as soon as it was ready, he fired at the phantom knight, truly hoping that it would be nearly enough to win. The powerful attack was heading straight toward the creature, impacting very cleanly with no defense at all. To his utter total surprise, it had no effect whatsoever. He then noticed a strange, glowing marking on the phantom knight's chest. That incredible magic resistance was truly formidable. Once more again, the boy found himself terribly cornered. He was extremely lucky that his agility was enough to keep on dodging. Needing much more defense, he wisely decided to use his strong shield as well, with it ready. He managed to block a very direct attack, but that sheer destructive power was far too dangerous. With visibly trembling hands, he realized that something else had happened. The dark phantom knight was changing its deadly attack pattern. This very time, it was coming from high above, preparing now to deliver a surely fatal blow. Young Bell needed to act as fast as he possibly could. The Black Knight's heavy sword struck the hard ground, completely then shattering the entire arena floor. Amidst all the rising dust, he completely lost sight of the boy. Finally, though, he revealed himself once again, gaining even slightly more distance. He simply did not have enough mana to pierce that armor, and soon then he realized that the thick dust had obscured his enemy, until suddenly he saw a bright glow forming. His very body could feel a really bad omen. The evil creature's sword had been thrown right at him. He quickly had to use his shield's strong protection to avoid being finished. The deadly blade ended up ricocheting far away, and the smart boy realized that the fierce attacks had not yet stopped. That previous strike had only been a clever feint. The actual real threat was coming fast from behind. There was absolutely nothing he could do. His bruised body writhed in sheer agony from the brutal impact. He was now lying on the cold ground before the creature, and it was clearly still not satisfied with his enemy's mere life, viciously trying to stomp him to end his suffering. Even though he was so weak, young Bell managed to dodge once more. He just regained his strength because he had drunk a potent elixir. If indeed not for that, he would have surely been defeated. The real problem was that he had truly nothing left to rely on, and the foul creature had retrieved its deadly sword. Faced with the grave risk and the sheer impossibility of winning, he desperately had to gamble. The shield was the very heaviest weapon he had. That then gave him a rather interesting plan. He swiftly imagined that he could throw it at the correct speed using powerful wind. That potent magic, finally. The shield had now become a truly offensive weapon. It was indeed the most powerful projectile he ever possessed. His bold plans were thwarted. The phantom knight deftly managed to dodge, something the boy had truly not fully expected. And this time now, he was utterly, completely unarmed. There was absolutely nothing left to stop that deadly blade. Utterly, completely cornered, he realized he would simply not be able to dodge, and now, alas, there was no true shield to fully protect him now. He desperately needed the trajectory to be corrected to have a mere chance at survival. Greatly surprising the creature, the shield somehow managed to hit it, buying him precious enough time to dodge the deadly sword. Seizing the vital opportunity, the boy swiftly advanced. This very time, he would change his whole type of attack. With the full strength of his mighty hammer, he truly hoped to cause some real damage. The Phantom Knight now knew it would simply not be able to dodge. The sheer force of the impact proved truly devastating. After that, finally, the creature fell to the ground, utterly defeated. Young Bell was panting after that very fierce battle. His bold strategy with the shield had indeed been very risky, but it had still proven most highly effective. Now he quickly needed to stab whatever foul thing was inside that armor. But the weary boy, alas, had taken too long to do so. The dreaded knight was standing tall once again. That long battle was not over. Quite unexpectedly, the heavy armor plates began to fall, and the creature finally revealed its true form. Something strange the boy had not yet fully understood. The transformed monster was about to grab a small latch, oddly present on the guard of its own sword, then pulling from it what appeared to be a new deadly weapon. That was actually some sort of strange lock. Its true sword had still been secretly sheathed. It had now finally been truly revealed. The poor boy had never even imagined that such a thing existed, and suddenly now he had a new deadly enemy to fight. The transformed creature had gained a fearsome lot of speed. Poor Bell was struggling hard to keep up with its swift attacks, being then violently thrown against the hard wall. The sharp pain that surged through his body was truly agonizing. Upon hitting the hard, cold ground, he simply no longer had any strength to continue fighting, and the relentless creature kept ever approaching him. His very senses were almost completely fading away, and the dreaded dungeon boss was prepared to take his very life, even without true strength. The boy bravely tried to stand once more, because he knew well that if he did absolutely nothing, his very life would end right there and then. He could now barely even lift his head. A deadly slash was coming swift toward him, but it somehow ended up being narrowly avoided. He was now using the mighty gauntlet. The foul creature's luck had finally completely run out. The terrifying monster did not fully understand. Its weakened victim seemed to have no true strength left. Meanwhile, the brave boy also summoned his own sword. For the very first time in the long battle, he finally managed to pressure his fierce enemy, and now the truly real fight was just about to begin. The two then began exchanging numerous swift blows. Both were indeed far much faster now, and the fierce battle extended throughout the vast entire arena. Without its armor, the monster had actually become even much stronger, but it was yet still not stronger than our protagonist. When using the true power of the mighty gauntlet, he was now confident that he would resolve this fierce conflict. Now the strange colored marking on the monster's body suddenly changed hue. It now instead glowed a vibrant, bright red. Our protagonist's keen sword passed right through the creature's eerie mirage. He then immediately realized that his sword had cut through absolutely nothing, thus forcing him to defend against a swift attack he had barely even seen. That sudden color change made the creature even far faster, and because of that, truly, our protagonist was once again sorely pressured, but he still had not been quite defeated yet, and he desperately needed more true power to win. The more raw power flowed through his own body, the very riskier the situation truly became. That sudden surge of strength was truly almost intoxicating. A horrid, grotesque figure appeared in his own mind. The gauntlet was cursed to receive that very power. He now needed to offer up his very own soul, and our protagonist was about to make that fateful pact. That strange, mysterious aura began to fully envelop him, utterly making him lose control. He could not resist so much sheer power. It was truly as if his very existence was slowly fading away. The dark entity warned him that he truly, desperately needed power now. The sole reason for his suffering was his own utter lack of strength. That was precisely why he had always been so oppressed, and because he was so weak. He had once ended up losing his life. By now he should be truly exhausted from being so utterly weak. It was high time for him to be the one who truly took what he desired, through sheer strength. Then little by little, he was slowly losing all control over himself. The foul creature saw this as an easy opportunity to execute him, but his true opponent had already transformed his very own power, now finally standing on equal footing with the creature's fearsome strength. The sheer shockwave resulting from their blades clashing was truly devastating. There was then chaos. Only one single thing driving him now: his insatiable, raw desire for destruction. He no longer truly wanted to win. He only purely desired to destroy, and the creature would surely be his first obstacle. And after that, he would ruthlessly destroy anything that stood in his way, even on the brink of losing all control. The boy still remembered his dear sister. That gave him a fleeting spark of awareness. Bell was still fiercely fighting the powerful creature. He realized then he could not pay this steep price now, because there was a beloved sister patiently waiting for him. His battles were never motivated by the desire to merely take lives. The sole true motivation behind his desire to grow stronger was the urgent need to protect his dear sister. In this precise way, he managed to regain control over himself. It was indeed time for that creature to yield the power it possessed. The power of Aegis was certainly truly formidable. He managed to push the dungeon boss back with relative ease. The entity slyly tried to tempt him. He only needed to merely ask, and it would give him its power, as long as he offered his own soul as payment. Because of the deep internal conflict, the boy still hesitated briefly, but he decided to attack nonetheless, and the creature advanced toward him menacingly as well. Both prepared powerful, decisive strikes, only to find themselves once again engaged in swift, rapid combat. The creature attempted to surprise him with a potent mana attack, but its speed was once again soundly surpassed. The boy deftly managed to disarm the creature, forcing one of its arms to brutally part from the rest of its monstrous body. That would surely make it impossible for the creature to continue fighting, and the protagonist finally found the vital opening he sorely needed, slashing the creature swiftly in two. At last, it truly seemed that the monster had been completely subdued. The undisputed winner of that battle was Bell, still feeling raw power flowing through his very body. He observed the creature's defeated form, which, having no more vital life, began to disintegrate. That arduous challenge had reached its conclusion, and now he could at last rid himself of the cursed gauntlet. That enemy had been far too powerful, truly, and the boy had almost lost complete control of himself. He needed to avoid using that cursed gauntlet as much as possible. Before him, a small shining vial had appeared. It was the fabled item he had been searching for, ambrosia. If he drank the precious contents of that vial, he would have as much mana as a skilled level B paladin, allowing him to use his divine arm and full abilities. The truth was, he had actually never seen a vial of ambrosia before, and he was a bit concerned, understandably. But he knew deep down that he needed to drink it if he wanted a better future. At first, he felt no discernible change at all. After a brief while, he began to feel his mana increasing quite significantly. It was incredible. He had reached level B so instantly. After the surging power came the pain, so very intense that the boy almost felt incapable of resisting. His chest ached fiercely, and at the very same time, he felt as if his whole body was burning. The sheath on his waist began to glow brightly, intensely. Not knowing truly what was happening, he collapsed to the hard ground, unconscious. Now he was lying in the direct center of a magical formation. Waking up still very much startled, he had no real idea what place this was. It was as if he had been instantly teleported to another dimension. A mysterious man welcomed him to this place. He had finally woken up. That man was his mentor, and it had been a very long time since they last saw each other. Even with his face partly hidden under a hood, the boy recognized him. There was no single doubt that this was his master. Other people were also present in that sacred place. A young girl carried a mighty hammer, and a concealed man was the grim bearer of the gauntlet, as well as a valiant knight who wielded a sharp sword. In that very place, he was warmly received by all of them. It was the absolute first time in his entire life he had newly learned of something like this. That was the sacred dimension of souls. Seeing his disciple again left the older man very emotional. The boy was also deeply happy about this unexpected reunion. His master's honored name was Regis. It was he who had originally given him Avalon. He was the very original bearer of the Achilles shield. Seeing his master so unexpectedly was most truly gratifying, but he could not understand anything at all. He did not know how he remembered him, since he had just returned in time. The master calmly said that he had been watching his pupil from that place. He had witnessed his fateful death and subsequent reincarnation. Hearing this, the boy became greatly intrigued about the true nature of that place. That space existed solely within Avalon itself. It was where the divine armaments were all stored, along with the very souls of each of their successors. This startling statement left the boy perplexed. He wanted to know where his former master's actual body was. He replied that his body was probably somewhere peacefully in the mountains, enjoying quiet retirement. Avalon was a divine armament that bonded uniquely with the souls of its bearers. By carrying it across time, its bearer lost physical connection with it, but his consciousness remained still linked to his own body. The boy immediately imagined that this returning to the past had been the direct work of his armament, but the master sorely doubted it. At the very least, he himself did not know that the armament was capable of such a grand thing. But the boy had not fully expected that. Even his own master could not provide him with that elusive answer. United with him now once again, his master told him that he had done a truly excellent job protecting his dear sister. He congratulated him heartily for that. But the young boy felt quite embarrassed upon receiving the praise, and he truly wanted to know why he was there with him. The wise master was just about to begin his explanation, but then one of the souls suddenly restarted moving. He declared that the two of them were taking far too long, and that he also keenly wanted to talk. His given name was Raven, the renowned wielder of the fire spitters. The master firmly warned that he had not finished speaking with his disciple, yet still the man asked him to be a bit more flexible. saying pointedly that he was not some stone golem before them all. The boy just simply watched, understanding absolutely nothing at all, then introducing himself to the new sixth successor. He declared it was a genuine pleasure to meet him. The young boy remained thoughtful for a brief moment, and when he then tried to shake his hand, he quickly realized that the man was merely playing a joke. That particular man was extremely easygoing, something the poor boy did not quite understand. Seeing his utter confusion, Revan found it rather quite amusing. He then said that the sixth successor was indeed so very naive. The young girl also then joined them. Charlotte kindly noted that the newcomer was still just adapting, but the bold man said it was just a harmless little joke, and then asked if Heru actually agreed with him. But that quiet man was extremely shy. Besides actually being the fourth successor, he pleaded them not to speak directly to him. The girl well knew that Revan truly liked to tease others. He then asked her not to get so very irritated, saying cheekily it ruined her beauty and made her wrinkle. Charlotte certainly did not appreciate that comment at all. The weary master tried to ask them to please stop arguing, but she clearly did not like Regis's current stance. Before she could even respond, she already then had to deal with the comedian's silly antics. It was quite strange for the boy to see his master in that very kind of situation, so unusually light-hearted. It only further showed that his predecessors were indeed so powerful. He had previously already asked his master about them. They were all truly great heroes who bravely fought against evil. The stern man with the sword asked them to get straight to the main point. The very first successor, Adam, confirmed gravely that there was a distinct purpose for that meeting. They could indeed summon the boy to that strange dimension to warn him. Upon quickly learning this, he asked what it was all about. The young sixth successor urgently needed to learn how to properly use the abilities of his divine arms. This sudden news took him completely by surprise. Divine arms, when truly fully mastered, radiated such an enormous amount of raw mana. If he were to carelessly unlock them now, it could prove fatal to his young body. That's precisely why he was feeling so very much pain. He really needs to wait for his body to mature to unlock this great power. But the poor boy has such urgent needs. He firmly believes he cannot possibly stop his progress now. He desperately needs all this power to be able to fully protect his sister. Adam quickly realized that the boy was truly unwavering, and there is only one critical thing to be done now. He grimly decided that he would crush the young boy right there. He surely didn't expect Adam to be so incredibly fast. He urgently needs to defend himself from that swift attack immediately. Only then does he finally realize that Adam is already right behind him. The poor boy was struck hard by the back of the sword. Adam truly hopes that with this he realizes he is still far too immature. But he clearly didn't take into account that his very attack could have been deftly blocked. Given this development, he then needed to rethink his plans. The boy's last few fights had made him progress quite a lot. Perhaps he is truly capable. Then he should first indeed be able to master the sword. All the other successors are eagerly waiting for this, and the young boy wants to know if he has truly finally been accepted by him. Adam grimly confirmed it. If he keeps only one single ability, he might just be able to properly control it, thereby granting the boy specific permission to fully unlock the B-level abilities of the famed Caliburn sword. He will then receive the other abilities when the proper time comes, as well as even those of A-level abilities that are truly quite extraordinary. The determined boy warned that he would unlock them all immediately. Adam actually seemed to like the fierce conviction of that little one, and the cheerful comedian wished that number 6 would have good luck. They all sincerely hope that the young protagonist will be able to fully protect his cherished little sister. Even the usually silent and most reserved young man, they will all continuously observe him carefully from the shadows. It is now time for the boy to safely return to his body. He suddenly woke up back inside the dungeon. He doesn't quite feel pain in his body anymore, but he has a very strange sensation. Contemplating the immense power in the sword, he is incredibly eager to use it soon in subjugating the monsters, for he already now knows the truly unique ability of that sword. We finally reached the precise place where the monsters are. They first needed to take a small boat, and now they are right in the middle of the perilous planned journey. The wary young man warned that the Leviathans would start appearing very soon, so it is definitely time to be fully prepared for battle. What he, however, doesn't yet know is that everyone there is secretly conspiring to attack him. Even the barber himself is involved in this dark plot. The young boy started finding some things rather strange about that task. Why indeed would a B-level knight be assigned to eliminate mere C-level creatures? Or why exactly would he need any help? It is quite certain that something sinister must have been planned. The shrewd protagonist knows that being attacked by complete surprise would surely be a problem. That's precisely why he must not take his eyes off him at any given moment. He was informed that they were getting ever closer and closer, yet the very place in question remained unnervingly calm, looking intently at the young man. He saw that he had drawn his sharp knife. The watchful protagonist held the oil extremely firmly, making a deliberate cut on his own arm. He calmly warned that he needed to attract the hungry creatures first. He then used his own fresh blood as bait for this purpose. That alone would be enough for creatures to go into a wild frenzy. As he had said, it didn't take very long for the first sea creature to appear. Along with it, then several others appeared as well, a much far greater number than they were actually expecting, since they are only sea-level creatures. The cunning protagonist suggested that they should split up to take better care of the boat, but he simply couldn't let the boy remain all alone. Very deeply suspicious, he asked what his true reasons were for that. Finally, then revealing his truly malicious side, he coldly declared that the boy could not possibly leave there alive. He swiftly initiated combat directly against the protagonist, who suddenly had his leg ensnared by the whip. He very quickly realized that he was already at a serious strategic disadvantage. The one who had skillfully tied him was one of the boatmen of that very place. He then slowly removed his hood to clearly reveal his identity. The treacherous man continued to hold the whip so firmly. That was indeed Spencer, someone the protagonist knew very, very well. The other devious young man urged him to do immediately what they had carefully planned. Using all his strength, he brutally lifted the protagonist off the ground with one of his legs completely frozen. That surely would be nothing at all pleasant, for he was callously thrown into the cold sea. Spencer clearly had not yet finished his cruel attack, as he then used his power to make the solid ice even larger. That cruel way it would be very difficult for the boy to return to the boat. Seemingly ignoring the basic laws of known physics, the heavy ice strangely began to sink. They confidently expect that with this, he will be utterly consumed by the creatures. Now they can surely count on the boy having tragically fallen in battle, leaving the ravenous monsters to ensure he definitely doesn't escape. The desperate boy needs to breathe again immediately to return to the surface. He quickly thought of using his trusty shield. It's actually capable of generating its own strong wind, so this certainly wouldn't be at all impossible. Truly impossible is that the solid ice actually sank. He rapidly began using magic to somehow produce some precious air, using the very interior of the protective shield. He barely managed to regain some of his vital breath. He certainly didn't expect those two vile men to join forces to betray him. He was quite alert around Razor, but sadly didn't know there was yet another one there as well. A very large part of the surface all around the boat is also completely frozen, and that unfortunately is not his only pressing problem. There are so many creatures there that compose a truly deadly threat. The immediate priority is to solve the urgent problem with his trapped leg. With the mighty shield, he should be easily able to break all that thick ice. He finally, thankfully managed to free himself, but his poor ankle had been badly injured. It likely must have happened when the sharp whip came into harsh contact with his skin. The hungry creatures quickly noticed that he was now bleeding. Without ever wasting precious time, he summoned his powerful sword. He clearly does not have the crucial numerical advantage, but this harsh experience will be an absolutely excellent training opportunity. It is indeed his first truly great challenge since his reincarnation. And now finally he will be able to use his amazing newly acquired ability. His very first target is one of the nearest creatures. The magical sword is glowing so intensely. A powerful projected energy blast had been swiftly fired at the creature. Several more other swords of pure light appeared in the dark water, completely eliminating all nearby hostility. It had been quite a while since the very last time he was able to use this. Summoning the mighty Starblade formation, it is now time for him to finally truly enjoy the hunt. Several more creatures are heading menacingly toward him, but the swift swords of light are easily capable of intercepting their intended targets. They are now heading straight directly for the creatures. This is the one true ability of the legendary Caliburn sword. It expertly summons several bright luminous swords, capable of swift flight, as deadly sharp as the original sword. Soon enough, all those vile creatures will be completely, utterly annihilated on the surface. Things up there are not easy either. They desperately have to reduce those awful creatures to absolutely nothing, and they are cleverly using the frozen ice surface for solid support. It has now been 5 long minutes since everything tragic happened. They are quite confident that the boy must have already long departed. From the very land of the still living, Spencer is greatly impressed with Razor's sharp cognitive ability. That whole plan was truly brilliant. Besides just that, he can somehow defeat all those numerous creatures with such ease. Razor coolly confirmed that he is on a completely different, higher level. It's definitely good that the boy wisely stays on his good side, or he too might perish like one of the mere creatures. But he foolishly believes he can still somehow be useful, without even realizing it. The solid ice beneath his very feet started to ominously crack. The deep cracks grew larger, and he went to nervously check what it could possibly be, only to be then suddenly brutally attacked. The other wary young man was greatly impressed by that sudden event. Something truly terrible had just happened underwater. A terrifyingly large hole had suddenly formed in the very middle of the ice. That is most definitely quite disastrous, because a truly gigantic sea creature appeared, ready to savagely feast on them. A massive tentacle from the huge creature emerged quickly from the water. He urgently needs to be extremely quick to avoid being caught fast by it. That fearsome creature is at least B level. which typically requires several strong paladins of the very same level to be subdued. If he is not nearly cautious enough, he will surely end up losing his precious life. As if all that were not nearly enough, the cunning creature has other nasty tricks up its sleeve, firing several dangerous projectiles in his general direction. But the agile knight skillfully managed to dodge them all. Now he quickly needs to deal with the fast-approaching tentacles. The terrified young man is quite sure that if he is ever caught by them, he will also certainly lose his own life. The much faster he solves this dire problem, the far greater his slim chance of survival. His special divine armament allows him to easily channel mana through his weapons, then releasing that potent energy through his powerful strikes. Since it actually functions so simply, his focused energy discharges are extremely devastatingly powerful. He is quite confident that he can subdue the massive creature with a single decisive blow. But the sly creature is much smarter than he initially imagined. The determined knight finally just managed to deliver his most powerful single attack, striking that extremely dangerous monster quite directly. But that sadly was not the desired result he was actually expecting, because the clever creature had somehow blocked the attack, using yet another poor monster's body. That only makes this situation even more complicated for him. Since his vile enemy is now completely enraged, his very life is at very real risk. He truly had to return to the safety of the boat, with all the ice completely destroyed. He now has no foothold to get close to the creature, and so now he needs to worry about the other monsters in the water, which are now jumping onto the boat, fiercely determined to annihilate all the humans. That suddenly ends up demanding all his attention, without even realizing that a tentacle was approaching, striking his very face brutally. The weapons he wields were not designed to face multiple opponents. Besides all that, he does not possess the strategic advantage of the environment. He simply cannot just leave the boat. He peers outside while the monsters gather. The more time passes, the riskier it is to stay in that place. But far more impressive than the monsters is the quite sudden sight of the protagonist emerging from the water. The young boy was supposed to have perished long ago. And then Geki appeared, flying over his shield, defeating yet even more monsters. The protagonist then saw that the deceiver was in an interesting situation. He truly only wanted to know how the boy had survived. Even after being so deceived, he now is willing to help them in that situation. But Razor still does not believe that the boy is capable of helping him. That truly larger creature is a B-level monster. There is absolutely nothing he can do against it. But this boy has something to show. The closer he now gets, the greater the number of tentacles. But our protagonist is not unprepared. He is still deftly using Caliburn's abilities. The keen blades manage to intercept all the tentacles. Seeing all this, Razor cannot quite believe that he has perfected the unique ability of his weapon. Those potent abilities must be difficult to master. Bell then warned that he would slice up that monster, and then turn it into fish food. The beastly creature prepares to fire more shots, launching huge water blasts at the boy, who still did not panic at any moment. That single attack could end up destroying the boat completely. Bell is now preparing to show the creature what he has in store for it, completely altering the formation of the light blades, merging them all into the original blade. All those swords had now fused, creating a new lightsaber capable of firing a concentrated energy beam. The creature's fierce attack collides with the boy's counterattack, but his sheer determination to win is much greater. His potent attack was able to completely pierce through the monster's body. Moreover, he flew over it while the blade sliced through. Finally, the great creature had been subdued after that attack. It was then completely out of combat, as its whole body had been split into two halves. It seems impossible that the boy was capable of achieving such a feat. Returning to the boat, he then confirmed that the next one would be Spencer, because he truly needs to pay for what he did earlier. Definitely, this mere boy will be a problem for Jin, or so his loyal servant thought. And even after that awesome display of strength, he is so determined to eliminate the boy right there. They loudly warn him that a bastard would never defeat a B-level paladin, as he now approaches him. The boy finds it surprising that this proud paladin still believes in victory. Since he first used Spencer for a surprise attack, he is quite sure that he deeply intimidates him. The two rival knights observe each other for a moment, until they both decide to launch their attacks. The sharp clash between their weapons finally happens. At first, it truly does not seem like the boy is being pressured, until Razor then manages to make the difference in their physical strength more apparent, now pushing the boy far away. Definitely, there is one among them whose raw physical strength is superior. He truly believes that this will be enough to determine the outcome of this whole battle. But our protagonist is already able to use the abilities of his sword, sending forth one of the light blades toward him. Fully knowing what they are capable of, he was almost immediately concerned. Being only this one blade, it likely wouldn't be difficult to defend against the attack. It was all just a clever trap by the boy to surprise him in his blind spot. Razor is also quite able to use the abilities of his divine armament, completely then destroying the light blade, little by little. Its faint image fades away. He still believes that the boy will never be able to land a single strike on his body so far. The brutal duel between them seems quite balanced. It will surely not be easy to defeat a B-level paladin. His own mana is being drained very quickly because of the abilities. Because of this, all he truly has left is that last sword. Being a much more experienced knight, he soon realized that the boy cannot keep using that ability, as it has a steep cost. Ruthlessly advancing toward him, he now wants to end the fight. His first attack did not hit the boy the way he intended, but the very second strike in the combination hit him directly. His body, still so fragile, and quite undeveloped body, is not capable of withstanding that impact. The sheer difference in physical strength between them is now proving to be a huge advantage. He could easily use Aegis to end this, but he deeply fears being trapped in the darkness, since such close combat is dangerous. He then switched weapons, firing several shots at his opponent, who nimbly managed to dodge all of them. That was just the chance the boy wanted, to surprise him with an attack. Quickly noticing the boy's own strategy, he soon realized that it lacked the agility to be effective. He just truly hadn't accounted for the unexpected to happen. Deftly using the momentum from those shots, he drew even closer, making his strike reach its target much faster. He very nearly cut off his enemy's head, but merely ended up angering him even more so. Seeing his opponent swiftly becoming more enraged, he soon realized that his strategy was working exceedingly well, because he was caught completely off guard by the final light blade, which sharply pierced through his very back. That was something he truly did not anticipate. With a grievous wound of that particular magnitude, he will simply not be able to continue fighting on. Upon realizing that, his grasp of the boy's strategy was utterly wrong. Knowing well his opponent cannot fight on anymore, he approached him calmly, then warned him it was truly over, and firmly recommended that he should give up. The very idea of trying to attack him again, the mere concept of giving up, does not apply to him, because he truly believes the boy is a threat to his dear master's future, Jin. So that is why the boy must be defeated right here. And now, faced with such a stance, he desires to know why he is so loyal to his own brother. That was when he searched through deep memories within his mind. In one battle, he had already been so brutally weakened, there was simply no strength left in his body to even keep walking. That was absolutely as far as he could possibly go. A lone man was slowly approaching him, stopping before his utterly obliterated body. He surmised that the man on the ground must be that mercenary, responsible for all of those wicked crimes. With what meager strength he still had left, he desperately tried to look upon this person. The strange young man was opening a small metallic flask, pouring its strange contents over the badly injured man. He said that this was his very lucky day, because from that precise moment on, he would be his new master. That is the true reason why he is so loyal. He had been wholly accepted by Jin, and he must repay all of that kindness, no matter what may happen to his own life. Utterly destroying the light blade summoned forth by the boy, what little remained of it was cast to the ground. Bell soon realized that his enemy had already sealed his fate. He once thought he was just a common bandit, but he respected his solemn word as a knight. Now they will both fight with their full power. The young man still remained incredibly angry. He's quite prepared to continue this duel, but Bell had witnessed that ability once before. It's very powerful, yet it takes considerable time to be ready. That is precisely why he will strike first. The boy had already seized the offensive as soon as he approached. He was then surprised by a sudden movement, being sharply struck by his opponent's powerful knee. Realizing, too late, he had been tricked by a feint, and now he is in grave risk of being utterly defeated. Regaining himself quickly, he warned that this is not yet the end, because he had saved his very last chance. A single small fragment of the sword had still endured, viciously slashing his opponent's back from one end clear to the other. That final strike left him completely incapacitated. He firmly believed he had destroyed every single sword. It is a terrible shame that he was gravely mistaken about that. The boy had only cleverly made it seem like they were all destroyed, and with that cunning, he managed to build his true strategy for victory. It was as if the boy possessed more battle experience than even him, something quite difficult to explain. That was truly challenging. If he had not possessed a final trump card, he would have almost surely lost that fight. But he was somehow able to defeat Razor, a strong B-level paladin. That is clear proof that he had indeed grown stronger. As meticulously planned, the ship continues its long journey to the continent. At last arriving at the destined city, Stella is anxiously looking for her most beloved brother, but she still has not yet found him. She keeps on searching all around the castle. The boy does not appear to be anywhere nearby. Even so, she determinedly continues without ever stopping, until she sadly contemplates the possibility that he has not yet even returned. The main problem is that the vital task he went to complete should have long already been finished. She then noticed the large doors that were wide open. That was the main library. It was quite possible that her brother was inside, and the young girl went there with the hopeful intention of finding him. But she instead ended up encountering someone quite else. Jin halted his very steps right in front of her, leaving the poor girl a little bit surprised, even though they were indeed true siblings. His very presence was deeply threatening. She is utterly terrified of that dreadful situation, but truly needs to greet him when she finally tried to do so. She could not quite find the words while being watched by such a menacing gaze, one capable of paralyzing her completely with fear. Passing coldly by her, Jin declared she was utterly worthless. Hesitantly, she took a few small steps back until she bumped hard into something, which then made her look sharply behind her. It was her dear brother who had finally found her, and he promptly asked Jin what he truly wanted with Sarah, but he still did not so much as respond at all. The young girl was finally able to truly rejoice in finding her dear brother. It was so very good to know that he had at last returned safely. Even so, it seemed he had been injured yet once again. He explained he had ended up encountering a very strong monster. This very time, a B-level paladin simply named Razor. Even after hearing all that, Jin showed absolutely no reaction at all. Bell then informed him the young man had failed in his little trap. Jin merely said that no one truly cared about any of that, because they were just tiny, small pebbles along his path. And the very same goes for that utterly foolish girl they called his dear sister. Now he would just continue along his own way, as he had absolutely no time to waste with mere pebbles. There was yet still something the protagonist desperately wanted to say. He had boldly warned his brother that he alone would be the one to succeed the Duke, because Jin was utterly incapable of truly protecting this noble family. He then immediately turned right around after hearing all that, looking down at the boy in a most menacing way, revealing his truly intense and utterly hostile presence. They were both swiftly engulfed by his potent aura, which was indeed something truly quite impressive. But even that was not nearly enough to make Bell hesitate in any real way. Jin showed a slight faint smile, finding all that rather interesting. He then began to laugh much even louder. It might prove interesting to observe the pebbles from time to precious time. Upon leaving the vast library, he coolly warned that his dear brother could try to finish him off whenever he so wished. Stella was incredibly worried about that tense conversation, but she was very quickly reassured by the calm protagonist, who knew well that was terribly frightening. That intense pressure was utterly surreal. Her other brother was indeed truly extraordinary in pure terms of strength. There was a truly huge power difference between them both. To be able to ever defeat him, Bell critically needs to reach a certain level before even graduating from the academy. After that strange incident, a few quiet days had since passed. He had his few bags packed, quite ready to depart. The good Duke was already patiently waiting there for him. Noticing approvingly that the boy was also quite fully prepared, he sincerely thanked his kind father for the generous support he had received. The prestigious academy requires all students to be accompanied by capable bodyguards. The Duke assured he would send a skilled B-level paladin along with him. He declared that he would be entirely at the young boy's service. Faced with all this, Bell then wanted to ask something important of the Duke, who graciously allowed the young boy to speak his full mind. But just before he could even truly ask, he was quite surprised because his dear sister had suddenly appeared also, all packed and quite ready to go. She quickly apologized for being so late, carrying her own small suitcase right over to the boy. His humble request then was that his beloved sister be also allowed to accompany him on this new journey. The Duke also wished to know the young boy's precise motivation. He simply didn't want to leave her all alone and truly wanted them to stay close together, but he regrettably could not possibly allow that. The strict academy only permitted actual bodyguards, and he was simply not going. There to play? Sarah desperately tried to ask her father to reconsider, but he sternly warned the girl not to make that same request again. So to solve this problem, he then asked that she be his bodyguard, because only when he's by her actual side, he is absolutely certain that he can accomplish anything great, even perhaps defeating a mighty A-level paladin. The Duke then was thoughtful for a brief passing moment, and clearly found the boy's bold statement amusing, merely saying that he could indeed do as he pleased. The grand carriage departed, heading straight toward the academy. Young Sarah was quite impressed with all the many different sights. The two siblings had finally arrived at their grand destination. That very building was truly magnificent indeed. The young girl was so happy for her brother's great achievement. That was a special school exclusively for noble elites, while he himself was in class. He asked his dear sister to study in their room. Now then, they needed to get settled down immediately, but suddenly they came across several students fiercely fighting. It was merely a friendly match between eager students, a very good opportunity to keenly observe and learn. Sarah herself was impressed. They all seemed so very strong, but our protagonist noticed that they still appeared to be at lowly D level. One particular boy among them stood out quite significantly, being almost immediately noticed by the astute protagonist, but he surprisingly was only at actual C level. He would clearly not be able to truly surpass the protagonist soon. Only 2 students remained in the ongoing battle, and that one boy believed that this surely was his day to claim victory. Furiously charging at his opponent, determined to finally defeat him now. But the other young man was not at all intimidated. He calmly allowed the perilous attack to come dangerously close. Even young Sarah was quite worried for him then. His eventual response was even more utterly surprising, because he had completely caught his shocked enemy off guard. All it truly took was a single swift strike. It didn't even really seem like he used any divine weapon. He was most definitely at formidable B level, maybe even far stronger than our own protagonist. Even all the other students were truly impressed with the final outcome. The famed representative of Roth Windsor was simply incredible indeed. That masterful serving left the protagonist deeply alarmed, because he well knew they were a bitter rival family, their longtime historical arch-enemies, in fact, and because of that, he now was their enemy, and his sisters as well. The grand admission ceremony at the academy was just about to begin. They were warmly congratulating the successful students, who had just been admitted to their very first New Year. This high honor was being done by the student council president, and he truly hoped that all these incoming freshmen would at very least be extremely strong, capable individuals. This Albert was currently a prominent third-year student, and his noble family had already produced so many renowned, skilled paladins. They had actually never even met in his past life, but he well knew that. At merely 18, Albert had already reached S level. He immediately began to wonder if he perhaps had been involved in that past incident. It was quite possible that he was one of those directly responsible. Nearby people were commenting that the boy was truly very intimidating, and was already then at high B level. It further seemed that more students in the esteemed student council itself were at the very same high level. The powerful council was thusly formed by only those who had ranked in the absolute top 4 winning positions. At the grand annual martial arts event, and the high title of president was granted to the event's sole ultimate champion. This Albert was undoubtedly so very powerful indeed. But our protagonist was not yet sure if this person was his old tormentor. To surely prevent such an attack again in the near future, he truly needed to show his enemies how strong he could now be. This academy did not actually have open elections for the council. Its students were selected based purely on raw martial abilities, and our protagonist eagerly wished to bravely participate as well, so that he himself could fairly defeat Albert in direct combat. Once inside the hushed classroom, he calmly waited for the professor to arrive. Suddenly, someone was approaching, hoping to sit beside him. He politely asked if someone was perhaps sitting in that empty chair. Bell kindly said that no one was, and that he certainly could sit there. That new boy's given name was Lineflex Seal, and he genuinely hoped they could have many enjoyable, fine years at the academy. But then, there was something else that caught his immediate attention. That particular boy's surname was not at all unfamiliar to him. Now seeing the protagonist's own sudden reaction, he naturally became a little bit more curious. He quickly said it was nothing, but he was quite inwardly surprised still, for a few short years on into the future, he would indeed eradicate certain nobles as part of a deep personal revenge, thereby earning the fearsome, lasting title of the Knight of Retribution, even though today he was only a mere fraction of what he would later truly become. Lime then asked the protagonist's actual full name. He was just about to answer, suddenly, sharply remembering that his own father had strongly advised him not to ever reveal which noble house he truly, actually belonged to, as many people might then help him solely because of his famed surname, which would surely prevent him from achieving his true, vital purpose at the academy. He desperately needed to prove his own worth through his own sheer hard effort. The new name the protagonist thus invented was Libel Slayer. He would steadfastly continue hiding his true identity until he finally soundly defeated Albert. Upon hearing that rather common surname, Line naturally assumed he also belonged to the lowly, humble commoner class. The distinct insignia on their school uniforms clearly showed which class they belonged to. Commoners simply wore a plain circle, while nobles proudly used a shining star. Our Bell quickly confirmed that he was indeed also a commoner, while Lime himself belonged to a rare bearing of commoners in that very school, as many there came from truly noble families. Commoners were indeed a distinct minority, now knowing that they were both of the very same shared class. He truly hoped they could get along well. It was quite interesting for the protagonist to befriend such a promising knight. Lime could indeed become a great future ally. In his entire past life he had never made friends, so this was actually surprisingly a bit pleasant. A certain boy was approaching them. As he already knew Lime, it really seemed like he had come there just to bother him. This, of course, was Roger. He hadn't ever expected to be in the same class as his friend, from his very own hometown. Everyone there knew he was the son of a count and was already at D level. He keenly wanted to know why that little commoner boy was there too. He had merely taken the admission exams just like everyone else did. Roger grudgingly ended up congratulating him for that, but Lime still seemed quite uncomfortable getting any closer. He warned harshly that Athena was not a place for him, as he was just a mere commoner, so it would be much better if he left now. Soon enough, The boy became quite visibly uneasy, and Roger warned that lowly slaves should obey their masters, and that he could easily crush someone of his status with just his words. Bell then intervened, stating that that was quite enough. Line quickly started to feel anxious for the new friend he had just made. Roger also wanted to know who this other boy was, immediately noticing that he was also just a commoner. Looking at him with all the utter disdain he had, Belt firmly told the boy to leave him, regardless of whether he was a commoner or not at all. Roger decided he would just simply let him go, making a very sudden movement toward the boy. He cruelly delivered a kick to Lime. Bell instantly ended up worrying about his newfound friend. Roger was clearly enjoying the whole situation. Bell stated that he was just a vile bastard, who shouldn't even remotely consider himself a paladin, since you truly belong to the nobility. You should actually care about the commoners. But he callously said that the poor only existed to be exploited by the nobles. Bell warned that his current understanding was very severely limited. A whole county could fall just as quickly as a single commoner. Roger then seemed like he was about to use magic, asking if the boy really wanted to fight him. Now he had his own divine weapon in his hands. Seeing that this conflict was truly inevitable, he quickly asked Lime to step far back. He was about to summon his own divine armament as well. Roger was quite visibly intrigued by that display, while the protagonist warned that he would forcibly instill some common sense into his thick head. Seeing that chief weapon, he began to despise him even much more. He must be nothing more than a complete nobody for having such a useless, pathetic divine weapon, one that couldn't even crush a tiny fly. And the protagonist then warned that if that were indeed the case, then Roger must be even less than a fly. He really didn't like being looked down upon by mere commoners, and arrogantly decided that he would finish him off right now. The protagonist was quite eager to see if he was actually capable of doing that. The entire whole class became interested in the impending fight. Roger foolishly charged at him, completely unaware that he was nothing more than a mere side character. The protagonist was fully prepared for combat now, watching his opponent's every side very closely. But then a mysterious hand had suddenly appeared, positioning itself directly between the two combatants. The lyre of that young woman was able to prevent the conflict. The melodious sound it produced disturbed them both greatly. Then she gently said they shouldn't fight since they were in the same very class, and politely asked them to pay attention to her calming words. Belle didn't really know who this strange girl was, but she simply continued playing her enchanting lyre, introducing herself gracefully. She said her name was Silpha. She actually came from the Elfage family, a grand house of marquises, a higher noble rank than even Roger's. The main teacher entered the classroom then, asking all the students to take their seats, because the important lesson was about to begin. For the very first task, she would evaluate her students' actual abilities. They had to diligently use their divine armaments to attack the designated target, as if it were a real monster. They had to aim precisely at those golems and show their true latent power. The very first student bravely demonstrated his abilities, charging directly at the target while wielding a sharp sword, delivering the anticipated first strike. But the sturdy target was too extremely hard. He was completely unable to do anything significant, only leaving a very superficial cut behind. Immediately, the strange structure regenerated itself completely, something that the keen protagonist quickly noticed. Several other students also tried to attack it. The teacher calmly observed that most students were still at E level, as most of them could barely produce any elemental damage. Now it was Lime's turn to demonstrate his own abilities. That plane spear had no apparent magical power. You must have been the only true F level in that whole evaluation. The determined boy charged at the target, driving the sharp tips of his spear into its tough body, and like quite some others, he was thrown forcefully backward. Roger sneered he was just a totally useless boy, completely incapable of using magic as the boy started getting up. Roger was arrogantly about to show the vast difference between himself and the trash. His divine armament glowed intensely like fire. He then attacked with great, immense confidence, and the wicked blade of his scythe embedded itself deeply in the target, leaving behind truly significant destruction. Some of his nearby classmates were very impressed. The teacher was quite pleased with his strong performance, as he was clearly at D level. Roger smugly assumed he must be the very best student in that entire class. Now it was the blonde girl's awaited turn. It was finally her special time to perform. She started gracefully playing her lyre, and her unique attack was in motion. Her fellow classmates were visibly disturbed by the piercing sound, and the powerful sound waves were also incredibly destructive, causing even much greater destruction to the resilient target. Those select two were on a completely different, higher level compared to the rest. Roger was suddenly very polite to her, and he only respected her then, because she was a much higher-ranking noble than him. He only did that simply to maintain a good impression with such an ability. But she coldly said she would prefer if he didn't even try that. She had already been seriously thinking about it. At the academy, they were all considered equals. Noble titles were utterly irrelevant in that sacred space. Roger was clearly upset about being ignored. The very next one to take the exam was the protagonist, and the quite arrogant boy believed that the commoner would surely be a failure, since he wouldn't possibly be able to do anything with just a sheath. Belle apologized calmly, saying he wouldn't use a sheath as a weapon, wielding caliburn instead to perform his attack. Roger was utterly shocked that boy had more than one divine armament. The blonde-haired girl was also greatly surprised, as was his newfound friend after his initial surprise. Roger then noticed that the weapon had no apparent magic, and after merely striking the target, he would be forcefully repelled backward. The protagonist only wished for him to pay close attention. He was just about to execute his decisive attack, with a truly great barrage of strikes. He completely, utterly destroyed the target. All that remained now were just mere pieces. His classmates were left quite speechless by that incredible display of strength. Even the stern teacher was deeply impressed. The golem had been cleanly cut apart without the slightest aid of magic. But with such a boy's skill, he didn't even need to resort to that. Roger simply could not accept that a commoner could be so very talented. Lime went over to his new friend to congratulate him on what he had just done. He said it was quite simple. Even Lime would surely be able to do it. The other boy was very much impressed. He still couldn't properly master magic. Bell assured him firmly that his judgment of the boy was absolutely correct. His own divine armament had truly great potential. As long as he never did give up, he could indeed become the most powerful holy knight. Lime was very deeply embarrassed by those encouraging, kind words, until the determined blonde girl appeared right between them. She really wanted to know how that boy was so incredibly talented. But her sudden closeness made the protagonist quite uncomfortable. Several other curious students were also quite interested. Some hadn't even been properly able to see his swift strikes. One of them then said that his sword must be the absolute most powerful divine artifact among all the freshmen. Roger overheard those words, and out of sheer fear, the speaking boy quickly corrected himself, saying instead that Roger's weapon was far stronger. That comment only made him even more furious. The assigned task for that day had finally ended. The very next lesson would be a practical field test. It would be hunting dangerous monsters in the forest right behind the school, and everyone absolutely had to be prepared. The other students still wanted to know more about that uniquely talented boy. Roger coldly called his bodyguard, who appeared almost immediately. He had a terribly worn-out expression and looked very, very unwell. Roger, it seems, had brought a familiar for added protection, and would surely need it for tomorrow's difficult task. The loyal knight asked if he truly wanted to use it during the task. The arrogant boy said there was no problem whatsoever with that, and his dutiful knight stated that the young master's actions were always remarkably courageous. Roger eagerly wanted to see the expressions of pure terror from both the lowly commoners and the lesser nobles, because he is certainly going to send that proud commoner straight down to hell. Outside the Grand Academy, they were busily preparing for class. The summoned monsters there started at F level, and some stronger E level monsters had also been recently released. Their primary task was to hunt down these creatures. Whoever successfully defeated the most of them would receive valuable extra points. Roger truly couldn't hide that he was a deeply malicious boy. Finally, the challenging practice had truly begun. It was now time for them to show what they were really capable of. The blonde girl wanted to keenly compete with the protagonist, to readily see who could get coveted first place. Little did she even know that first place already had an owner. He urgently needed to show his true strength to all of them. Lime meekly wanted to accompany him. Since he still didn't quite have the confidence to fight all alone yet, he generously allowed him to come along, but made it perfectly clear he wouldn't go easy at all. Swiftly running toward the dark forest, he simply told him to follow. It didn't take very long before they encountered several vile creatures, but they were not a real, significant challenge for the protagonist, who was effortlessly cutting down those monsters as if they were mere pieces of paper. His other classmates were also very deeply engaged. He had already handily defeated 15 such monsters. It was so incredibly easy that it didn't even count as a proper warm-up. Lime was quite visibly impressed with his classmates' amazing performance, but they had absolutely no time for idle conversation. One of the menacing creatures had appeared right behind the boy, but he was thankfully saved by the protagonist. He really needed to stay very much alert, as the sheer number of creatures was far greater than expected. Lime urgently needed to fight against his own crippling fears. His many classmates were progressing quite normally, and the wild creatures were being steadily defeated. He knew instinctively he needed to put in much more effort than that, hidden deep within the forest. Roger maliciously continued watching his rivals, filled with bitter envy. He firmly believed those commoners were insufferably arrogant. That was precisely why he was going to make them dearly pay. Very soon they would meet the bitter end of their lives. Wielding a strange staff, he was about to summon forth something. The protagonist quickly took note of the sudden appearance of that ominous magic circle, immediately becoming greatly intrigued because from deep within it, a fearsome creature was emerging. A monster seemingly capable of controlling fierce fire. That was a truly dangerous salamander. Its gaping mouth was enormous and its teeth extremely, terrifyingly lethal. All the nearby students were worried sick about that sudden appearance, while they hastily ran away. The protagonist remained perfectly still. Lime simply couldn't believe that such a terrifying creature had appeared. and it was already fully prepared to attack absolutely anyone, leaving the poor boy completely, utterly terrified for the second critical time. He had to be saved by the brave protagonist, who skillfully managed to block the raging flames using his sturdy shield. He then ordered the boy to run away quickly with the others. A powerful B-level creature was not ever supposed to have appeared in the forest, but that fact was irrelevant. It was going to be a lot of thrilling fun. The protagonist was already deftly using his unique abilities, sending his many swords of light directly against the creature. They remarkably managed to cut right through its tough, protective scales. Roger certainly had not expected that the mere commoner would be capable of using such unique abilities. He now needed to increase the overall difficulty and call for his loyal knight, once again, who was ever ready to obey all his master's orders. The massive creature was completely surrounded by the swords of brilliant light. Lime found that absolutely incredible. His skilled classmate was actually pressuring a very powerful creature. It was high time for it to finally disappear. The swords of pure light were poised, prepared to deliver a fatal final blow. But the interfering knight would not simply allow that to happen, deliberately sabotaging the young boy's attack. And he very quickly realized what had just happened. There was yet another person in the dense forest who started slowly approaching them, coolly stating that unique shining ability was indeed quite impressive. Presuming correctly that he was the true master of that fearsome creature, the menacing knight stated clearly that he would not leave without the boy's own head. The fiery salamander resumed throwing scorching fireballs, while the dark knight also attacked fiercely. The powerful attacks collided violently and struck each other, raising a truly huge cloud of obscuring steam. To quickly disperse it, he used the strong wind from his shield. But the cunning knight had already prepared well in advance, deftly using a water prison to isolate each of those shining blades. They now seemed to be completely incapacitated. That magical water prison had effectively sealed his special abilities. That was most definitely a B-level skilled paladin. The protagonist suddenly found himself surrounded by very challenging opponents. Both the deadly salamander and the skilled knight continued relentlessly attacking. Now he truly had to deal with both simultaneously, blocking one fierce strike with his shield, and cutting down the other with his sharp sword. With his own current power level, this fight was clearly beyond his present capabilities. Lime honestly didn't know what he possibly should do at this alarming rate. His good friend would surely end up being defeated. He then saw Roger in the middle of the forest. His very presence was definitely suspicious. That was surely his family's staff used for summoning. He immediately then approached Roger, who truly hadn't expected the boy to ever find him. He quickly asked if that familiar belonged to him. He must stop this now because the protagonist was in grave danger. Roger then attacked him without a single second thought, telling the poor weakling to just stay on the ground. It was so pathetic that he was unable to do anything much to help anyone. He then began to remember when he was still training as a young child. It was terribly pathetic that he couldn't even use magic, and he had indeed been humiliated countless times by that same boy. But things simply couldn't continue that way. So then he stood up because he vividly remembered the protagonist's brave words to him. That was truly the very first time someone had ever spoken such truly encouraging words to him. He would absolutely not let his dear friend die because he had now firmly decided to save him. Roger, then, couldn't quite believe that pathetic weakling actually thought he could possibly defeat him. Because mere worms were always just worms. Lime boldly told him to just shut up, and that he certainly shouldn't dare measure his worth without his express permission. Roger then started feeling a little bit uneasy. He angrily warned that he wouldn't lose just because the boy could now use magic. Now Lime actually agreed with that particular statement. The foolish idiot's wicked scythe also started glowing ominously. He absolutely needed to finish off the worthless trash right now, but Lime instead exuded such great confidence. His special spear was able to easily freeze those menacing flames, making them then disappear entirely. A truly completely unexpected, shocking result. The actual real trash here clearly had red hair. Roger was visibly getting more and much more enraged, charging ever so furiously at his stunned classmate. But Lime's spear was indeed much stronger, fully capable of easily blocking that fierce attack. Their mighty weapons then clashed and became firmly locked together. Roger simply couldn't even believe what was truly happening, and Lime knew precisely exactly what he was now doing. With surprising ease, he utterly destroyed the boy's divine armament, causing him then to fall hard to his very knees. He was utterly unable to fully accept what just happened. It was simply impossible that he had been defeated by a mere F-level paladin. It was indeed quite strange that Lime had ever feared that truly pathetic boy, because right now he felt absolutely nothing for him. He then ordered him to immediately hand over the summoning staff. Roger incredulously asked if he even knew what he was doing. He came from a truly great county and could swiftly destroy the boy's entire family. But it seemed he still hadn't truly understood the harsh reality of the situation. Lime then tried to reason with the boy while slowly freezing his legs, commanding him firmly once more to quickly hand over the staff. With his entire worthless pride completely obliterated, he finally shamefully agreed to give up the precious item, begging pathetically only to be somehow spared, promising never, ever to do anything cruel again. He had now been completely defeated and utterly, publicly humiliated. The powerful, ancient staff had now changed hands. Lime sternly warned Roger to stay well away from him and his friend, or else things could get truly complicated. He then finally relaxed just a little bit, while devious Roger was secretly thinking of ways to act. The long chain of his weapon was still within easy reach, and then suddenly the other end of it began to faintly glow. A dastardly, cowardly sneak attack was in progress. Roger foolishly believed he would now take down that boy, but Lime was actually completely, totally aware of it, easily blocking that quite pathetic attack. It was indeed truly pathetic that he had decided to act that vile way. The precious summoning staff lay there on the ground, now completely destroyed by the determined boy, leaving Roger completely, utterly speechless. He simply couldn't believe that the rare item had been destroyed. Then little by little, the salamander began to slowly disappear, a truly very unexpected result for that fateful night. Immediately then realizing that something dire had happened to his master, from far afar, he could now see that he had been subdued. So then he turned his vile attention to the other commoner, but he still couldn't act so very easily, because he simply didn't have much time to be distracted. The actual true mastermind behind those vile actions had been discovered. It surely seemed like he had long wanted to take down the protagonist. It was such a great shame it had to end this way, in a truly fair fight. That knight would still never be able to defeat him. All he really could do now was curse the boy, firing desperately several more times at him, missing every single shot. His dire situation had just become even more complicated. Even though that particular arrogant knight was B-level, he was clearly at the very bottom of the ranking. The protagonist swiftly struck his head with the heavy hilt of his sword. The evident gap between their abilities was truly far too great. Bell then warned that he would soon hand him over to the teacher. So then he had to use his one last resort, prostrating himself down immediately. He desperately, pitifully begged for mercy. It was all so sudden that the protagonist was truly caught off guard. The cunning knight claimed he was then just following his master's orders. Disobeying a powerful noble was truly not an easy, simple task. That was precisely what the sly knight wanted, to thereby catch the unsuspecting boy off guard. Finally, seemingly receiving forgiveness for his past actions, he outwardly thanked him, but in cold truth, he fully, secretly planned to betray him. Only just then did the boy warn that he was simply playing with him, preparing his sharp sword to then strike him. He had indeed already suspected he would be thus deceived. Lime quickly went over to his brave friend, urgently wanting to know if he was now hurt. The protagonist certainly gratefully knew that it was truly Lime's help that had prevented the very worst from happening. The grateful boy was only then returning the favor. That firm handshake sealed their strong friendship. Other worried students arrived there as well, sincerely thanking them for their brave help. It was truly impressive that he had so defeated a B-level knight. But amazingly, that wasn't the only strange thing that had happened. That same knight was one of Roger's closest allies. The summoned fire salamander was directly, mystically linked to both of them. He was most definitely a despicable person indeed. And precisely because of what he had done, Lime was now being highly praised by his classmates. It truly seemed that in the end, he really was remarkably strong. Humbly, Lime thanked them sincerely for their compliments. As fully expected from the knight you would become one day, someone clearly had been watching everything from afar. The blonde girl certainly seemed to have liked what she saw, fully understanding how that boy's divine armament actually worked. The vital task had finally been completed, and Roger would surely be punished for his vile actions. The very girl was waiting for them right at the end of the corridor. She indeed had something important to say to the protagonist. Looking intently at her, he remembered that her name was Silva. He asked what she wanted. She actually already knew that it was Avalon, the very name of his divine ornament. That truly immediately surprised him. She also clearly knew that it was the sacred weapon of heroes of the distant past. He had absolutely no idea how that strange girl knew about Avalon. From the protagonist's own facial expression, she was so completely right. She was the very first person to recognize the true nature of that divine armament. Her stated objective was very simple, and the protagonist naturally seemed quite concerned. She then clasped her hands together neatly in front of him. Bowing, she very politely inquired if she could perhaps see that weapon. The poor boy had not expected that at all. She had truly always admired that fabled armament, the legendary weapon of heroes, so she desperately wanted to see it. Since it was merely a simple request, he showed her the sheath. She was certainly quite impressed. She truly hadn't imagined it was something so real. The protagonist urgently wanted to know how she actually knew about this item. She said there was a distinct legend in her mother's family about a great hero who once had a sheath containing countless multiple weapons. It was quite possible that one of his ancient predecessors was from her family. Lime still didn't fully understand the whole incredible story, but surely knew that his friend's divine armament must be truly incredible. The girl was so grateful as one of her cherished dreams had come true. As a small token of her appreciation, she suggested the two of them could perhaps go out together one day. There was apparently a great new cafe in town, They really should all go there together sometime. Lime certainly really liked that fine idea, and the protagonist then thought a while. It would indeed be interesting to fully explore the city. He readily agreed but said he would bring someone else with him. The small young group was now happily inside the cafe. Sarah absolutely loved the delicious taste of that strawberry pie. Belle was so very happy that his dear sister was enjoying it too. The girl hadn't expected the protagonist to have such a truly beautiful. Sister Sarah became just a little shy at the kind compliment. Seeing her actually have fun was even more deeply enjoyable for the protagonist. He himself was also having a truly great time. He had simply never had experiences quite like this in his past life. The blonde girl then asked for everyone's immediate attention. She was indeed going to play a song for them all. It would be quite interesting to hear music played by a divine weapon. The girl then started playing her lyre, but alas, the sound was simply awful. Her musical proficiency was sadly terrible. The girl herself knew she played very badly. She did it really just to entertain her friends. Others too found it very amusing, even asking her to continue playing, pointing at Lime. She then said he should sing as well. The two of them were truly entertaining everyone inside the cafe. It eventually ended up turning into a really fun performance. Those two were his very first real friends in his entire life. Outside later, they were commenting on how much fun it had been. The girl then wanted to take Sierra to buy some clothes. He wouldn't let his dear sister go alone, but his friend kindly said this was a girl's thing. The protagonist was understandably quite disappointed. He only simply asked to be informed if anything happened, and the girl then realized that he was an excellent brother. Sarah then wanted to know if she had any siblings. A little saddened, she then said she had none. It seemed, just then, that someone was looking for Silva. That person's name was indeed Evelyn. He was, in fact, one of the student council members. It was a rather unusual introduction for half-siblings. She perhaps should have been more polite, but she truly didn't see him as a brother. He had come simply to make her train, because if her divine weapon were truly perfected one day, it would be most useful to him. The girl had already firmly told him she had no real interest in participating in wars. Rolling up his sleeves then, he said it was indeed very inconvenient that she had that mindset. It seemed now that he was going to have to drag her by force. A little blood then started to seep from his palm, until the liquid soon began to gush intensely. Sarah was truly very frightened by that scene, and the boy was seemingly controlling it as he pleased. A divine weapon, indeed, that used blood. She quickly called for Mary, her bodyguard, but the boy had already swiftly taken control of the situation. Looking back, she then realized her bodyguard had been defeated. That now made the situation even more problematic. Her brother firmly said they needed to leave now, and she quickly told Sarah to run away because things could get dangerous. She now needed to play her weapon to defend herself. But alas, she wasn't able to handle that attack. The young man quickly realized that if she asked for help, things would get very complicated. So he then needed to resolve it immediately. Sarah is now about to be attacked, but she luckily ended up being saved by her brother's friend. Silva then fell to the ground during the weekend. It was truly foolish of her to do that. But now, alas, she won't be able to resist him. He then used his ability to capture her, forcefully lifting her body off the ground. Sarah is still understandably quite terrified. The true cause of this was her own brother indeed. Truly desperate, Sarah asked for the protagonist's immediate help. He then quickly approached the very place, swiftly cutting off that boy's menacing tentacles, who clearly didn't expect this kind of sudden intervention. The blonde girl had thus been rescued. Witnessing that spectacle made Sarah very much relieved. The protagonist now wants to know what this strange guy wants with his dear friend. The pleasant moment they were just having had been utterly destroyed. That rather mysterious guy then asked if the protagonist is perhaps one of his sister's close friends. Not that it was terribly important, really, but it's certainly better if he doesn't meddle in private family matters. The protagonist then asked Lena to take careful care of the girls, because he has a specific face to smash right now, and he was absolutely going to deal with him immediately. But the other guy is quite surprised by that bold stance. He sternly warned that there's no real merit in defending that particular girl. Using his sharp sword to cut those attacks is very easy indeed, which clearly left the guy quite visibly impressed. Helping a good friend is something completely natural, of course. Then striking an attack directly against him. The guy quickly protected himself with a sturdy shield, warning him that this was a total waste of time. That crimson blood shield is really quite impressive. It certainly looks like his sword won't truly work against it. He simply can't waste his precious mana in this pointless fight. The other guy was already fully prepared to attack, but the protagonist somehow managed to deftly dodge it. Recognizing now that the protagonist is very particularly irritating, he then warned that he would finish everything very quickly, firing several more attacks right at him, a very rather predictable attack pattern. Then the determined boy wielded the fiery fire spitter. Seeing then that the boy possessed more than just one divine weapon, he quickly realized that he was not just an ordinary opponent. It was now the protagonist's own turn to fire, now somehow managing to stop all the fierce attacks coming his way. It really looks like they are at a temporary stalemate. Seeing that he skillfully intercepted his powerful attacks only made that intense fight even much more complicated, but he is fiercely determined to capture his fleeing sister, suddenly producing a wicked spear made of pure blood. That deadly move will be the very last. The protagonist grimly confirmed that it really would be indeed. The two then attacked each other with absolutely everything they had. Some strange people on the rooftop said this was quite rather interesting. Looking sharply up, they noticed the sudden arrival of these new people. One of them, upon heavily landing on the solid ground, instantly shattered the sturdy sidewalk stones. He had landed directly between the fighting two, clearly demonstrating his immense strength. He would greatly like to join that ongoing fight as well. The protagonist instantly knows he belongs to the powerful student council. While the blue-haired guy curiously wants to know what Zeal is actually doing there, he lightly mourned that he was being far too hard on the young kids. The girl stated that this particular behavior is quite utterly embarrassing, because he is just a great big weakling. Seeing his two council colleagues there, he reluctantly decided to stop his current attacks. But Zio certainly would have liked the exciting fight to last a little bit longer, making his entire whole body brightly glow. He declared it was best they truly went all out. His entire massive body was suddenly covered in thick armor. Besides being incredibly large, he has a very powerful presence. The girl calmly asked the muscular one to just do his job, while she expertly summoned several magical chains. That intervention was necessary to prevent him from taking further drastic actions. They clearly weren't there to simply continue a fight. Seeing that immense magical power displayed, the protagonist quickly realized that she is also incredibly very strong. Zio easily managed to break the binding chains without very much effort. He stated that Evelyn also has responsibilities, along with the entire student council in the esteemed company of Albert. Because of all this, he will now spend a whole month on an arduous expedition inside the deep forest. The important task begins almost immediately. He soon realized he had no real other choice. Leaving there, he coldly warned that he would surely take his sister in just a month. The girl mockingly waved goodbye to the so-called weakling newbie. It's a great relief that they all finally left. The student council. These students are all complete monsters. Looking carefully back, he checked to see if his dear friends were truly okay. She quietly said she wasn't badly hurt, and sincerely apologized for getting him deeply involved in all that. But the kind protagonist said it wasn't at all necessary. He just really wants to know why she and her own brother are constantly fighting. The primary reason for this is that he cruelly wants to use her, as he is the designated next heir. When he finally graduates, he will actively try to expand his very own territory by aggressively attacking dangerous, unexplored regions. Lime surely knows those distant lands are filled with extremely powerful creatures. Her callous brother believes that her unique divine weapon will be a truly powerful artifact in the coming war. But she absolutely doesn't want to ever fight. Her firm intention is to become much stronger and then become the rightful heir. The very same difficult situation the protagonist is currently in. The main problem is that she felt she couldn't really do anything. She's still far from being truly able to defeat him. Sarah insisted that's not quite true because that brave girl was certainly able to protect her. It really looks like that gave her a tiny spark of newfound hope. Sarah is extremely very grateful for what just happened. Even the stoic protagonist wants to sincerely express his deep gratitude, and he quickly went to the quiet girl to do exactly so. Being genuinely able to save someone is what truly makes them strong. In the distant past, he simply couldn't. He firmly said she should have more confidence, because if she truly lacks strength, she can always train. Lime kindly said she would help her train too. At very first, she doesn't even quite know what to properly say, but she is immensely very grateful for her wonderful new friends. The protagonist keenly knows that the very last attack could have easily been fatal. In just a month, he will surely return, so Belle desperately needs to become much stronger. For achieving that, he absolutely needs to unlock his own unique ability. He urgently needs to talk to the old comedian. He critically needs the express permission of the wise predecessors to acquire powerful new abilities, and he absolutely must return to that mystical space. Closing his tired eyes, he slowly began to deeply concentrate, carefully channeling his potent mana through the ancient sheath. He was then received by all the many other predecessors. It has indeed been a little while since they all last saw each other. The young boy has an urgent request to humbly make, but they somehow already know precisely what it is, because they clearly saw everything that just happened in the very last battle. That particular artifact was a little bit problematic. That strange guy can shape bloody things quite freely. It greatly resembles Avalon itself quite a whole lot. It then fell into a rather brief, heavy silence. The comedian sagely warned that if he merely burns that cursed blood, then everything will be swiftly resolved, and the clever boy thinks exactly the very same way, which is precisely why he desperately wants his unique fire ability. Something the old comedian readily agreed to do without much hesitation, just only to show that it had all been a silly joke. He truly really enjoys being a funny comedian. Charlotte firmly said he should immediately stop with that kind of utter nonsense, but it's clearly much stronger even than him. Being genuinely funny is cool, and that specific ability consumes a vast lot of magical power. If he recklessly used it right now, he would very soon be completely utterly drained. But he does have a strict condition for granting it. Before the crucial rematch, you absolutely must fire 300 continuous shots per single day. Only that arduous way he will then consider granting the potent ability to the determined boy. The main problem is that this seems quite unattainable. All he can currently manage is barely 100 shots in a whole single day. But the stern comedian doesn't want to hear any excuses. And as very soon as he finally accomplishes that, he surely must return after speaking. He then snapped his fingers. The boy was sent instantly back into his body. Realizing now that besides being merely funny, the comedian is also a bit cruel, he very soon realized that to use the full ability, you will surely need to triple his current magical power. The main problem is that this might not be quite possible. The wise predecessors agree that this is an almost impossible challenge. There's simply no way for the boy to increase his magical power that very much. But still they are interested in seeing the boy's actual progress. After all, if he can't become much stronger, he certainly won't be able to win. The protagonist then went to the forest. There you would get to fire his powerful shots, defeating some minor creatures that isn't too terribly difficult to do. But still the workload is truly quite exhausting. The only known way to increase his magical power is by tirelessly hunting creatures. So naturally he will hunt everything he possibly can find. His close friends are impressed with his growing strength. It was indeed good that they came along with him too. Everyone surely wants to get even stronger. That's precisely how she convinced Line to go along as well. The burning desire to become stronger is far greater than any fear. Our protagonist truly has such good friends that contributes greatly to his progress. After merely firing 100 shots, he felt completely drained. But by this hunting, he increased his power ever so slightly. But alas, it still wasn't nearly enough. That meager progress is far from truly ideal. Then suddenly he heard a terrifying roar deep in the forest. That certainly didn't seem to have come from a mere orc. It could well be that his friends are in grave danger. Finally, our protagonist found the fearsome creature. It was just lying on the ground as if soundly sleeping. Beside its massive body were his two dear friends, happily celebrating what they had amazingly managed to do. The young girl praised Belle's excellent work. Even then, he was curious to know if his friends had truly defeated that creature. And amazingly, that was exactly what indeed happened. That was a dangerous sea-level creature. He initially thought his friends were at a much lower level. Since they normally wouldn't be able to defeat it then, they instead came up with a quite efficient strategy. First, wisely they surrounded the enemy entirely with ice. And then the girl attacked fiercely with her sound waves, which then were reflected by the ice now around them. It was truly an exceptionally impressive plan. Those two clearly have a very interesting synergy. That outcome was the result of their well-combined attack. And then the protagonist had a brilliant idea too. Now suddenly he knows how he will be able to fire even more shots. Meanwhile, yet more creatures had suddenly appeared. Several more orcs like the one that had just been defeated. A very large group like that is going to be extremely problematic, because now they are all so very tired. The protagonist suddenly has a truly brilliant idea. He somehow can still keep on fighting. They surely would never have imagined exactly that. The young protagonist was capable of doing all of that. Seeing all that, he left in a great hurry. The observant girl remembered that he had something important to do. The ancient predecessors did not at all expect the boy to return quite so quickly. The wary comedian hopes. He's not foolishly trying to change the firm terms of the agreement. But instead the boy said he had already fully completed the task. Something which left them all quite utterly astonished. It is simply not possible that he did all that in just one single day. The comedian then stated that he is the only one who makes jokes there. But still the boy remained quite firm. They then asked him to show in a real battle that he truly changed. He thus would have to fire all of those shots during a fierce fight, and even could use other weapons if he so wanted to. Unless, naturally of course, he was deathly afraid, but the protagonist actually liked that challenge a whole lot. He then just needed the signal to be clearly given, and the battle would promptly begin. They are now properly prepared, and the comedian is quite eager. To witness that progress, the elder then gave the starting signal. Bell then already had his trusty pistol in hand. But alas, the comedian had already swiftly fired the first shot, which squarely hit the boy. He then said the boy was far too slow and sorely needed to improve on that, as might be expected from the very original user of that unique weapon. He is indeed much faster. It truly seems that the comedian is in his deadly 100 jokes mode, and our brave protagonist does not dare want to lose that crucial duel. The two then fired rapidly several times, leaving even the comedian quite visibly impressed. Charlotte then said the boy was surprisingly very good, and only now she understood precisely why the elder decided to specially train him. Indeed, now he's exceptionally proud of his young pupil. The rather shy one said that the true real battle had yet to even begin, and then Charlotte did not much like his ominous tone of voice. But then he coolly reminded them that they still needed to see if the boy was actually still capable of firing more shots. Even stern Adam agreed 100 mere shots would not nearly be enough, and so the boy continued to push himself ever so hard, but even that was still not truly challenging for the skilled comedian. They both continued firing several more shots. Now a little more tired, he was slowly losing his crucial rhythm. Adam, meanwhile, had counted them all precisely. And amazingly, the boy had fired exactly 97 shots. Seeing then that the battle was fast becoming uninteresting, the bored comedian was just about to end it. But suddenly the protagonist had a hidden trump card. He quickly summoned the very powerful shield. That specific way he would be able to protect himself just a little more. That move made the comedian instantly rethink his entire strategy. The clever boy was going to use the very wind as well, skillfully making the wind pass directly through the pistol. And naturally the comedian wanted to know what exactly he intended to do with that. The protagonist then said those mere bullets were now useless. He amazingly managed to strengthen his next shot with the wind, far surpassing the comedian's own strength, who was truly quite surprised by that unexpected result. That unique combination allows him now to increase his overall power, even if currently he has so little magical energy. For the very first time, the comedian had actually been pressured in this whole battle. Not even the boy's own mentor had ever thought of that distinct possibility. Charlotte now is cheering loudly for him, earnestly hoping he can finally defeat the comedian. The perplexed comedian wanted to know why exactly the boy had not used that same strategy, right from the beginning, pointedly reminding him that he had fallen into a clever trap before, and so now it was high time to return the exact favor. But merely hiding that one ability might not truly change things. Now instead, the boy desperately needed to dodge all of those incoming shots. And so the battle became suddenly much more balanced yet again. Because remarkably, the protagonist was able to skillfully hit the comedian's very first shot, since now his magical power was also rapidly running low. While still the boy continued quite firm in his clever strategy, the entire situation had now become extremely complicated. His formidable opponent was now being steadily pressured. It was finally time to end all this. But clearly the comedian is not a remotely easy enemy to defeat. He quickly hid behind his own flames, thereby preventing the boy from ever knowing his true current position. Besides then not knowing where exactly the shots were now coming from, he was very soon hit sharply in the back, which then gave him a vital clue about the comedian's likely location. But alas, he had already swiftly repositioned himself, deftly hitting the boy yet once again. All now he needed to do was simply keep hiding deep within the flames, because now the protagonist had been almost completely cornered. He desperately needed to push away those obscuring flames using the strong wind. And indeed that was exactly what he then did to finally find the comedian, who now could no longer effectively hide behind the swirling flames. Now finally he had a perfectly clear view to hit his intended target, but then he was suddenly unable to fire any more shots. This whole situation was definitely extremely complicated. The other watching predecessors rightly suspected that he might have completely exhausted his remaining magical power, thereby becoming completely utterly vulnerable to the waiting comedian. But amazingly, the comedian had also just run out of bullets. The very final impact then occurred, painfully causing the comedian to finally fall to his very knees. He truly had been pushed far to his absolute limit, just exactly like the boy in that intense duel who had somehow managed to fire 301 staggering shots. After all that, he was utterly, completely drained. He had barely won by a very, very small margin. Seeing our protagonist's incredible effort, the beaten comedian was surprisingly very happy, graciously extending his tired hand to him. It thereby finally approved of him, and now would unlock the truly unique ability of his special weapon. Very, very politely, he then helped the exhausted boy stand up once again, who was so very grateful to have been finally recognized. He truly needed to perfect his knowledge of that divine weapon, receiving yet another ability. He is now confident that he can surely defeat that other bastard. All the comedian genuinely wants now is for his dear pupil to win this battle, and he's strongly assured that he would bring forth victory. A few more days pass and the protagonist continued training deep in the forest, because it is absolutely essential for him to keep getting even stronger. Little by little, he is steadily further refining his mastery of his unique ability. His friends approached nearby to see what just happened. That unique ability of his is indeed truly impressive. The girl then asked if he could give them some vital tips so they could learn as well. All he could really say was for them to keep defeating more monsters. That is the only true path he currently knows. But he also knows a training method to greatly enhance the power they already have, and to diligently practice it every single day. He actually learned it from his own master. They need to sit down, fully close their eyes, and deeply concentrate, making that very symbolic hand gesture. This is the absolute easiest way to circulate magical power throughout the body. By practicing that specific meditation for an hour each day, their magical power can grow much more quickly, besides greatly helping to refine it further, making it far easier to release power during intense battle. They quickly decided they would try to do that as well. This particular practice does not bring forth immediate results, but in the long run, it is truly very effective. His eager friends began circulating magic throughout their entire bodies. The protagonist soon noticed that they had progressed far too quickly. Perhaps their current progress is far above the average. He simply couldn't afford to fall further behind, so he firmly decided he would keep on training. That would also greatly contribute to strengthening his own unique ability. But 5 more days passed and the group of friends kept right on training. After 10 long days, they were already fiercely dueling each other to become even stronger still. A full total of 20 days passed, and they continued training quite diligently. After a whole month, he met with that bastard once again. This time, however, he did not come alone to take away his sister. It had indeed been a while since they last truly saw each other. Even the young girl had become notably stronger. The vile bastard ordered his loyal servant to seize the girl, as he himself would handle this troublesome nuisance. The servant clearly understood his given orders. But the brave girl was not going to make that vile task easy at all, immediately then attacking him with her sacred divine weapon. But the swift servant was fast enough to nimbly dodge those attacks. Lime, however, would not let her dear friend fight entirely alone, charging bravely at that servant so fiercely. He would absolutely not allow her to be taken from Alice in this brutal fight. Meanwhile, on the other side, it was now time for the protagonist to finally settle his matters. He had just one crucial question before that, which he truly wanted to ask. What exactly was that guy going to do with his very own sister? Her divine weapon is indeed special, passed down carefully through many generations, capable of completely controlling people through mere sound. That very way, she could turn people into living battle instruments, making war much, much easier. That is truly a most despicable goal. He just selfishly wants to make his own life easier. His poor sister is nothing more than a mere disposable tool to him. Our protagonist does not need any single further explanation, because that foul guy is simply not worthy of being called a brother. He coldly warned that anger alone would not make that weapon work against him. But that is precisely what they were soon about to see. He found the protagonist's current stance rather strange, because the strange pistol was pointed directly at its own user, who then began using his fearsome unique ability. The crimson flames were directed right at his own heart. They quickly now enveloped his entire trembling body. That, behold, is the soul incineration, an undeniably impressive technique. Even though he was not outwardly impressed, the bastard grimly acknowledged that this was going to be quite troublesome. The protagonist had indeed become so much stronger, and great wings suddenly emerged from his back. With that power, all of his physical attributes were greatly enhanced. He's now easily able to approach his waiting enemy much more quickly. All the bastard merely did was fire a few quick shots. That was utterly useless because his flames can now burn all that blood, something the arrogant bastard was certainly not expecting. It was time for the protagonist to utterly kill him until nothing at all was left, preparing relentlessly, without stopping, to land a devastating punch on him. The bastard immediately produced a crimson shield for his desperate protection, which was barely able to withstand the very first impact. But it shattered the way it finally did. It would surely not be able to stop the second one that way. The protagonist then managed to hit him squarely in the face, sending the poor wretched fool's body flying far away. The blood he wields now is completely, utterly useless. He should really just give up and quickly go home. But that, alas, is not all he truly has to show. The resilient bastard had stood defiantly up again. His burning eyes had completely transformed as well. Now, the very surface of his skin had undergone a terrifying transformation. It felt as though his very blood had started furiously boiling. With that new form, he had become immensely much more powerful. And the protagonist could not quite tell what that truly was. That was pure dragon blood. That ability utterly transformed his entire body. He now looked much like a fearsome dragon. His raw power had grown quite significantly. That immense pressure is really, truly problematic. He arrogantly warned the protagonist that he should feel justly proud of it, and deeply regret it at the very same time. His razor-sharp claws were already fully prepared, because he was just about to feel his terrible, full fury. Now Bell paid extremely close attention to his powerful opponent's advance. With his newly enhanced abilities, he was barely able to dodge it. Even so, he was merely superficially cut. His opponent was clearly intrigued. He truly thought he had squarely hit the target. While he was distracted thinking, the protagonist quickly prepared an attack, launching his searing flames directly at him. He amazingly managed to hit him very precisely. Now he would make absolutely everything explode high into the air. The vast resulting destruction was truly quite impressive. A lot of thick smoke had risen ominously into the air, but his fearsome opponent seemed utterly, completely unscathed. He sneered that attack had been so completely pathetic. The tough scales on his body remained perfectly clean. There were no visible signs or even traces of soot or burns. He then charged furiously at the protagonist, ready to cruelly slice him far apart. Just fire alone would not be enough for this tough opponent, so he decided then he would crush him with his mighty fists. The two titans were on a direct collision course. Bell had to nimbly dodge those claws once yet again. Only then, perhaps, would he have a fleeting chance to strike. landing a glancing hit on his opponent's tough side. Feeling the jarring impact on his very own skin, he was not impressed even in the slightest. Those scales clearly were also very resistant to blunt impact. The protagonist got momentarily distracted by his grim thoughts, being suddenly caught off guard by the swift dragon's tail, which hurled him violently toward the unforgiving ground, while his opponent swiftly prepared a powerful, dark spell to annihilate him. Bell knew he absolutely needed to defend himself immediately now, sending a massive fireball skyward to avoid being directly hit. But his opponent's subsequent attack was much more devastating indeed. A great fiery explosion occurred up in the air. The boy now appeared to be very nearly exhausted. Even though he was remarkably persistent still, he was so clearly at his absolute limit, and the dragon, meanwhile, was capable of making several such attacks. That would make things considerably more complicated for him now, because the protagonist desperately needed to use even more of his waning magical power. And on the ground, his friends were then engaged in another pitched battle. Their powerful enemy was most probably at least at level B. They quickly decided they would swiftly execute a clever combined attack. The stoic, silent enemy just calmly waited for their first movement. I then was the first to advance, thereby forcing his surprised opponent to defend himself hastily. The young boy had powerfully driven his sharp spear deep into the ground. That sudden move made his opponent become slightly more cautious. Finally, belatedly realizing that he had been completely surrounded by towering ice walls, this was the girl's perfect time to swiftly act. She was already quickly approaching, sending powerful, sharp sound waves at her cornered opponent. That clever combination had once been enough to easily defeat a fearsome monster, stronger than them. So they firmly believed the battle would soon be over. But the knight merely said all of that was quite completely useless. He then struck his ominous staff hard against the unyielding ground. A dark and quite mysterious runic circle appeared, completely absorbing all the sound waves of the fierce attack, until absolutely precious nothing of it remained. An unexpected harsh result for the young kids. Still standing with his imposing staff resting firmly on the cold ground, he then prepared an attack capable of utterly annihilating them. The ominous dark portal grew steadily larger and larger, finally releasing the powerful absorbed sound waves. Indeed, thanks to his absorption, those very attacks were now completely useless. The poor girl was still truly processing what had happened. The knight then gravely apologized to her, but alas, said he had to take her now, since he had received direct orders from his stern master. But Luan was fiercely not going to let that happen, and the knight sternly warned the boy not to dare interfere. But he would never, ever listen to those words. So he surely needed to be subdued. He was still very much inexperienced in combat. The girl clearly saw that her friend was also struggling badly. Knowing full well she needed to help him, she became quite desperate because she couldn't move her body at all. Meanwhile, the poor boy continued to be brutally beaten. She only wished desperately she had a little more strength to resist. She then remembered the protagonist's wise words, that such training would help her release power in battle. She just truly needed to calm herself down. That precise way, she would then be able to focus on the magical power within her own body. Believing firmly she could fight, she was finally ready to save her dear friend. His very skull was about to be completely crushed by that staff. But then sound waves flew swiftly through the air. Lime somehow managed to react just in time. It was not yet his time for him to be defeated, and the poor, bewildered knight was quite puzzled by what was happening. That truly was the result of the sound produced by the girl. Lime could now hear her friend perfectly. The music she played was so beautiful, and that very music transformed into strength in the boy's body, who was now suddenly able to pressure his opponent, managing thereby to throw him off balance. The knight did not know where that mere child had drawn so much strength. From his divine weapon now shone intensely, ready to swiftly freeze him. Ice plates emerged from the ground, advancing menacingly toward the knight, who was absolutely certain he was in trouble. He would not possibly be able to absorb all of that, being completely, utterly engulfed by the ice in the air. The protagonist, meanwhile, was already nearing his limit. The grueling battle was about to end, but he then saw that his friends had succeeded. Now all that truly remains is to defeat the bastard standing before his very eyes. What he will do now is a desperate gamble, because he will now use his hidden trump card. The ancient dragon was intrigued to realize that the mere boy was still hiding his strength, but that surely wouldn't make a difference, because he was about to experience true, utter despair. The battle between the two titans intensified even more, because the dragon, too, was also increasing his power, about to finally unleash a devastating attack. The protagonist, our hero, knew full well that his opponent was about to launch his most powerful strike. But he also had something critical to do. For it to truly work, he just needed to survive. The dragon had finally, at last, completed the charging phase of his ability, unleashing all this terrifying power against the protagonist. That fearsome energy sphere was truly enormous, and wholly unexpected size that could make things even more difficult. The boy had to act incredibly fast to avoid being defeated. The only real thing he had was that one attack, launching his own flames to prevent being hit. But the dragon cunningly continued generating even more power, a terrifying force that the protagonist could not possibly withstand. He had been utterly overpowered by his opponent. It truly seemed that the battle was finally over. That was not quite the ending the dragon had hoped for. He had wanted something much more thrilling. Only then, belatedly, did he realize that the protagonist had appeared behind him? He had been foolishly distracted and had not paid attention to his own defense. While he was busy charging all that power, the clever boy had created a clone from his own flames, which, naturally, had been destroyed by the dragon, an uncanny ability he never expected the protagonist to master. Feeling overly confident, he believed the protagonist couldn't possibly harm him, because his prior attacks were weak. It was now time for him to show the true progress of his training, because through it, he had greatly perfected his mastery of magic. The dragon suddenly sensed that the boy's arm was coated in immense mana. His attacks may not have worked so far, true, but that single punch was going to be different. Looking back now, the dragon realized that it was quite dangerous. Those potent blue flames were the boy's ultimate trump card, striking his enemy's vulnerable back with his glorious fist, causing him such intense and agonizing pain, strong enough, incredibly, to shatter the dragon's tough scales. It was simply impossible that he had been defeated by a mere child. After some considerable time, he managed to open his eyes. His entire body was completely immobilized by solid ice. He and his loyal servant have been thoroughly defeated. It took a long while, but they eventually regained consciousness. The dragon first thought he would be bothered by the kids, but since he had been fairly defeated, it didn't really bother him. There was something the girl wanted to say to him now. She would absolutely not let him start a war. She would never be his tool, and he had better truly understand that. Quite unexpectedly, he readily seemed to agree. He would do exactly as the brave girl asked. Such incredibly strange words for them to hear, leaving them rather doubtful. Even so, Lime then dispelled her divine weapon, making the perilous ice disappear. The girl then asked him not to come see her again. Without even answering her, he simply told his mate to accompany him. The two were now quietly leaving. That battle had been exhausting for everyone indeed, and it was truly impressive that the protagonist had been able to defeat a powerful member of the student council. He merely said it was by a narrow margin. The grateful girl stood up to speak with her dear friends, and one day soon she would repay all that kindness. They were true friends, and that's not how things really worked. Hearing that, she quickly made sure to correct it. They were indeed best friends. Words that made the young protagonist very happy. After this grueling battle, they might well be targeted by other members of the student council, so he surely needed to become even stronger. Especially so against Albert, because he didn't ever want another tragedy to happen again. He would become the absolute strongest here and show everyone his true power. Eventually, inevitably, he would defeat his own brother and become the head of the family. This very time he would definitely be able to protect his dear sister. Many long years passed, and a fateful battle was about to begin. The protagonist, at last, had finally found his brother, but now he was so much stronger. Besides having rightfully become the head of the family, Jin still didn't seem to care about titles. He coldly said a curse was upon his little brother. In his past tragic life, he learned that it was a terrible shame not to be able to fully protect those he loved. The profound suffering he felt that day was truly intense. That's precisely why he was in this place now. Knowing true, deep pain, there was no enemy he couldn't defeat. His beloved sister's fate was at stake here. Mufasa and Scar, these rivals, were about to enter combat, and the determined protagonist believed he was going to change his entire destiny.